Hello, hello, everybody. This is your boss Shrimp once again, back to you for more Art with Adventure. Sorry for the long wait. Had to prepare some stuff before starting, but here we are right now. We're gonna go start doing more sketch and listening to more the Dead Mage who doesn't want a fourth time. So from the last time we left off, I did some sketches for some mechanical animals, and we're proceeding to do the third sketch. And from the last story that we heard from the that Major doesn't want the fourth time, uh, yeah, Vandally managed to meet up with the four colored hero guys, the party that was responsible for the death of her mother. And the story is getting interesting and getting intense. We will hear more about what's going to happen after this. What's his plans? He actually said his plans to give up on the duchy that he was supposed to register for his adventurer ID or something. But right now he has concluded that it's not worth it to do it in that municipality, and now he's moving on to a different place. But he's gonna screw up a lot of people in this place because they had did some really bad stuff towards the Titans that he was responsible for. And let's see what will happen here with him screwing up with people in this particular city that he's going to do. So yeah, let's not talk much about uh, yeah, less talking about this stuff, and let's proceed with the stuff we need to do. Okay, so from the last time that we sketched to mechanical creatures here, mech coyote and a mech lynx. Yeah, that's what the species is called for this particular cat that I draw over here. Yeah. So I'm proceeding for a horse, and I'm gonna draw the base and finish it up by designing the mechanical parts for this one. Let's see what we can uh, add up for this particular design. And let's see. I'm not very sure what's next after this. What kind of animal? Should we try some sea creature or maybe some ancient ones like dinosaurs maybe? Uh, well, it depends on my mood. But yeah, let's proceed with the story also. Here we are right now. So we're at chapter 78 of the Dead Mage who doesn't want a fourth time. Uh, okay, so well, let us proceed with this. I'll talk to you guys more later, and let's see what we can do for today.
Chapter 78, The departing ominous bird covers its trail and secretly threatens the capital. I understand it's harmless, but what do we do with it? Asked Eleonora. It resembles a dungeon. We leave it, Vandally replied. Seriously? We're not going to try going inside? Asked Zran. This is too close to the city, said Vandally. It would be troublesome to run into adventurers coming to investigate as we come back out, wouldn't it? Also, more importantly, we need to look for Princess Livia. That's true, Eleonora agreed. Vandally decided that they would discuss his labyrinth construction skill later. It wasn't a skill that he could investigate near the city, anyway. The day after the small incident where a damp child fled the Adventurers Guild for some unknown reason, the city of Niaki was experiencing an ordinary day as usual. Other than the absence of addicts buying drugs and men going to the brothel that they were familiar with, it was supposed to be just another day like yesterday. Deen's life had been a series of small misfortunes, things had never gone her way. Her father injured himself, forcing her to work to support her family. As soon as her father recovered and became able to work again, he forced her to get married. Her mother-in-law worked her like a servant, and soon after that mother-in-law died, the man Deen had married died as well. Life remained busy for her. Just when she thought that she might be able to be at ease as her son got married, her son turned out to be a thankless child, taking his wife and leaving, showing no sign of wanting to make life easier for his parent. The only one who would listen to Deen's words was her foolish nephew. Nothing good happened after that, Either an endless cycle of growing apples and selling them. Dini was walking at the front of the group as if dragging her legs along the ground. That day, she had been selling apples in the marketplace as usual when she saw a kid with money passing by. But you know, I never expected that I would be able to keep going after I died. To think that that person would entrust me with this after my death. I'm sure that I lived my entire life for the sole purpose of dying yesterday. That's why I was born. Dini felt a sense of fulfillment that she had never managed to experience while she was alive. She even felt proud at the fact that she could be a part of something bigger. Dini emerged from the dark, comfortable passage into a forest. This was a forest that she remembered. This was the forest where she had died. If she passed through here, she would reach the city of Niaki. Dini could guide her companions through this place while whispering the important mission that she had been entrusted with. Eline, kill Heinz. Dini, who had been selling apples in the marketplace up until yesterday, was walking forward as a part of a group of over 1,000 undead. A dungeon had suddenly appeared in what had been a normal forest up until yesterday, and a large wave of monsters overflowing from it, mainly consisting of undead, was closing in on the city of Niaki. I am a cheerful mercenary Zan. Today's going to be cheery, heart-skipping fun, a certain individual sang as he plowed the dirt with a hoe and spread fertilizer across the ground. Eh? You want more broken shells? Leave it to me, Honey. Flark, who had once been a criminal slave owned by the Greenwind Spear Riley, was happily obeying the instructions of the monster plants. Now that he had turned into a zombie, it was impossible for his heart to be skipping. But for some reason, this was how he always was now. He even sang at night, so he was even shunned slightly by his zombie companions. Incidentally, it was a complete mystery as to how Flark could accurately and immediately interpret what the monster plants wanted despite the fact that they had no eyes or mouth to communicate. Flark gave a different answer each time he was asked, so nobody knew the truth. The most common answer that he gave was that he was able to hear the voices of fairies. Oi, Flark. We'll leave the fields to you guys, shouted an undead titan whose entire body was radiating fury. Apparently, the undead titans of Taylorsheim were about to initiate a plan to take back the children that had been stolen from them. Flark didn't know the exact details of the plan, but he had no qualms with that. The Holy Sun told us to leave the monster plants to you, so don't let us down. The Titan told him. Of course, Flark shouted back. For some reason, Vandali trusted him and held expectations of him. Hearing this was enough to blow Flark's fatigue away. Not that zombies like him felt fatigue in the first place. Skipping around the field, he harvested vegetables, used a tractor golem to harvest wheat and checked up on the Immortalants. Looky here. In the Immortalants forest, there was a wooden gate made of numerous plants twisted together that certainly hadn't been there yesterday. For some reason, a dungeon had appeared. Kanata, who was sitting in his carriage and traveling along the highway, was slowly approaching Vandali's location that he knew through his target radar, but there were things that frequently bewildered him. What kind of tricks has that undead bastard used? He wondered. Thanks to the radar, Kanata knew the exact details of where Vandali was. It told him not only the distance, but even the difference in height between Kanata's position and Vandali's. According to the radar, Vandali had been traveling about 300 meters above the ground last night. Kanata didn't have a clock, so he couldn't be completely accurate, but making a rough calculation based on the distance and time that Vandali had traveled, his speed was around 60 or 70 kilometers per hour. He had traveled in this manner for several hours before finally coming down around sunrise. As Kanata didn't have an accurate map, he could only make a rough guess, but it was likely that Vandali had stopped in the Hartna Duchy's capital. The problem was not the place Vandali was in, but how he had traveled there. The fact that he has some crazy amount of mana that's over 100 million was included in the information that the god gave me, but he shouldn't be able to use any magic but death attribute magic. How is he flying in this world that has no planes or helicopters? Kanata wondered. According to the information that Kanata had been provided, Vandali should have been unable to use any magic other than death attribute magic. And what Kanata knew about death attribute magic was the knowledge detailed in the documents that had been left behind in Origin and the incomplete information that Rod Corti had given him. Kanata had analyzed that information to conclude that contrary to its title, death attribute magic was specialized for use in medicine. He believed that he could deal with it as long as he had a way to block poison and disease, that it was the kind of magic that would be a seasonal exclusive ability in a game. According to his analysis, there was no death attribute spell that would allow the user to fly through the sky like a bird. He hasn't acquired an affinity for any other attributes. What method did he use to fly? Surely, he isn't going to tell me that he's created an airplane, is he? Kanata wondered if Vandali had used his knowledge from Earth to build a vehicle, but decided that it was probably too difficult to accomplish this after all. In the army, Kanata had received all kinds of training and learned about advanced technology. If he wanted to, he could probably gather materials and create a glider or, with his magic, a hot air balloon. But it would probably be impossible to travel that distance at that speed with nothing but a glider, and doing it with a hot air balloon was out of the question. That was why Kanata thought that it must be an airplane, but he knew that it was probably impossible to build one, even if Andali did have the knowledge required to do so. No, it might be possible in theory, but it would require all the tools to be built by hand, not to mention every single screw, and the airplane would have to be designed before being assembled. An airplane otaku might be able to build a propeller plane given a few years, but it was difficult to believe that Vandali had been an airplane otaku when he was still known as Amamiya Hiroto. Come to think of it, this is a fantasy world, isn't it? Kanata remembered. Not simply a world in a primitive era. The god said something about dragons, too. He might have tamed a monster or undead that can fly around while carrying someone. Say, what do you think? Kanata turned to ask the half-naked women lying in the carriage. After stealing the merchant's carriage, Kanata had stocked up on food and equipment in the city. With that said, he hadn't really felt like wearing leather armor made of the hides of monsters that he wasn't familiar with, and he couldn't even stand the sight of heavy-looking metal armor. In the end, the only armor he bought was a pair of boots and some gloves made from the hide of a wild beast. To make up for that, he bought a silver-coated knife as a countermeasure against undead, a bow and arrows among other things as weapons. He also bought a short staff, which would be helpful as a medium to channel his magic, while complaining that in origin, there were items like rings, gloves and arm implants that had the same function. He also wanted a crossbow, but apparently those couldn't be purchased in the Hartnett Duchy without identification papers, so he gave up on that. He thought to recuperate his strength with a delicious meal and a clean bed, but no meals or beds of the kind that Kanata demanded were to be found in a city of Lambda with a population of just a few 10,000 people. He didn't particularly want to eat the bizarre meat of monsters. Deciding that he would have women instead, Kanata headed to the red light district, only to be presented with beast person, dwarf and titan prostitutes. Does this world have nothing but trash? He wondered. Apparently, it just so happened that no human prostitutes were available, but Kanata decided that he wasn't interested in paying money to buy low-quality products and put the red light district behind him. The next day, he happened to see the Adventurers Guild, remembered Rod Corty's words and decided to try registering, thinking that he would be able to buy a crossbow if he did. Things went well until partway through. He was even calm enough to look at the elf receptionist and think, come to think of it, I never got to watch the last movie in that trilogy about the ring. But before he knew it, he was surrounded by soldiers and adventurers. Apparently, among the goods that Kanata had sold, there were products that were only sold by the merchant that he had robbed. This had put the authorities on his track. Flame, Kanata whispered, unleashing a fire attribute attack against the threatening soldiers around him. As the soldiers and adventurers who had assumed that Kanata was a simple bandit and the receptionists who were unlucky enough to be there were engulfed in flames, he used Gungnir to slip through the building, the ground surface and the outer walls of the city to make an escape. They were probably still under the assumption that Kanata was inside the city and conducting a futile search. And then Kanata traveled along the highway and encountered another merchant's carriage, which he attacked and robbed. The half-naked women in the carriage now were the adventurers who had been guarding that carriage. It was surprising to me, but the Adventurers Guild wasn't anything special, said Kanata. I suppose it's only natural, since I'm still one of the bravest despite being a degenerate. Kanata's attribute values were equivalent to a D-class adventurers, his skills to a class adventurers and his magic to a B or A class adventurers. He wasn't invincible by any means. If he didn't have Gungnir, no, even with Gungnir, if he had stayed in the city and continued his rampage, he would have been defeated by the class adventurers and knights the moment he ran out of mana. He didn't know any martial skills or no attribute magic, and he was unaware of the effects of many skills. By the way, aren't you going to respond? He asked the women. Oh, come to think of it, I've already killed you. Man, I don't remember killing that woman there, but I guess I didn't stem her bleeding properly when I cut the tendons in her limbs to make sure that she couldn't resist. The female adventurers whom Kanata had briefly enjoyed were all dead. Because he hadn't paid for them, he had even been able to enjoy the beast person and dwarf woman to some extent. It was certain that Kanata was already being searched for as a dangerous criminal. He had cast an advanced fire attribute spell and killed many people inside the Adventurers Guild. After all, to regain its honor, the guild itself would be hunting him down even more zealously than the soldiers. Even if he used Gungna, he would probably be caught and killed within a few years. But how could Kanata behave like this despite this fact? How could he carry out such senseless violence without feeling any guilt or fear of being punished? The answer to these was that Kanata had essentially been transferred here, and he couldn't even perceive any value in this third life of his. Vandali had previously thought that Amamiya Hiroto and the others reincarnating with him wouldn't be able to lay a hand on him without trouble because when they reincarnated in Lambda, they would be born to parents giving birth to them. They would have family and friends in Lambda, a society that they relied on. They would have to live in Lambda until they died. If they did anything reckless, they would simply be tightening a noose around their own necks, and they would even cause trouble for their family, friends and lovers in Lambda. But someone transferred here directly from another world wouldn't have any bonds to the world of Lambda. To take extreme examples, such a person could vent his anger and kill innocent people, rob others because he doesn't have money and rape women for his own enjoyment before killing them as long as he ensured his own escape, since he would have no concerns for anyone other than himself. Even if he was caught and punished, he wouldn't cause any trouble. There wasn't a single person that he wanted to avoid causing trouble for in this foreign world, so nobody would be troubled. Kanata was technically someone who had been reincarnated and reborn, but he had come to Lambda with a physical body of the same age as the one he had in his previous life. There was essentially no difference between him and someone who had been transferred here directly. Thus, he didn't have the common sense and ethics of this world that someone reincarnating and doing things over from childhood would learn. Such a person would, for better or worse, understand that the inhabitants of this world were humans, just like them, but Kanata hadn't learned that. Nor did he have any intention to. Most importantly, for Kanata, this third life in Lambda was nothing more than a connection to his fourth life. He was also treating the people of this world with utter contempt. To him, they were primitives living in a world inferior to Earth and Origin. No, he might not even consider them to be living beings. Statuses, skills, elves, beast people, dwarves, to him, Lambda felt like a very realistic game. He couldn't think of this world as reality. He's not going to fly off to somewhere else if I head for the capital now, is he? It would be a real pain to have to figure out a way to cross the mountain range, Kanata murmured to himself. The information that Rodcorti had given him was full of holes, so although Kanata knew that Vandali's stronghold was beyond the mountain range, he had no idea how Vandali had crossed the mountain range, nor did he know anything about the stronghold itself. Well, if I have this destiny or whatever, I'm sure I'll be able to kill him. Ah, but before that, I have to dispose of this carriage and these corpses. The marketplace of Nineland, the capital city of the Hartner Duchy, was full of liveliness under the hot summer sun. As the duchy was located inland, most marine products were dried, salted or pickled. There were only a few fresh products from the sea as they required magic items to preserve them as they were transported. But other than that, there was an abundant assortment of products available for purchase. That spice, I've never seen it before, said Eleonora. Yes, it's a special product of this country. It's not sold in other duchies. The shopkeeper told her, ogling at her without any subtlety. Well then, may I have some? Eleonora asked with a smile. Yes. Thank you, said the shopkeeper. But wouldn't you prefer to have the powdered stuff? It's fine. Please give me the fruit, Eleonora requested. You're quite the connoisseur for a first-time buyer. Here you are. After receiving a bag of the spice, Eleonora headed towards another store. Hey, the pretty lady over there, an accessory merchant called out to her. Won't you come and take a look? Eleonora paid no attention to him. The task that Vandali had entrusted her with was the collection of spices, vegetables and fruit. Foo-fa-foo, your prided special products will lose their exclusiveness to Vandali-sama's magic, she said to herself with a laugh. With death attribute magic, it was possible to prevent plants that were difficult to cultivate from dying. Although water was still needed, it was possible to grow alpine plants in deserts. Despite this, in Origin, even if the plants grew, it was difficult to make them produce flowers and fruit in such harsh conditions. But organisms mutated much more easily in Lambda than in Origin. It was certain that if these plants were planted in Talersheim, they would turn into monster plants or immortal ints and produce fruit. As soon as the bag in Eleonora's arms was handed over to Vandali and taken to Talersheim, the Hartner Duchy would lose its industrial strength. Although, that would only be meaningful once Talersheim began trading with other duchies. Eleonora herself didn't actually really understand just how much suffering her actions would cause the Hartner Duchy. It sounds a little empty to say aloud, Eleonora murmured. Vandali-sama did say that he would cause a calamity, so he should be causing a proper calamity. Eleonora and everyone else, who had traveled a distance that would take a month on foot in a single night with Vandali's spirit form wings, knew nothing of the assault of the monsters that had appeared in the city of Niaki a few days ago. Now then, next is that fruit. I've never seen it before. Are you a traveler, Oju-san? This fruit is a special product of this duchy, it can't be cultivated anywhere else. It's the pride of my birthplace. I see. Then I suppose I'll take some. In the end, I do have to reject the society of this duchy. Is that so? That's right. Is that so? Though he was facing the guild master of the Mages Guild, who was twitching with the whites of his eyes showing, Vandali was having a conversation that was very close to a monologue. As for why the guild master of the Mages Guild had entered a vegetative state, the reason was that he was an individual with connections to the pure-breed vampires. Vandali, who had learned this information from the vampire he had turned into an undead in the city of Niaki, had attacked the guild master on the morning of his arrival in Nineland. He had asked the guild master's whereabouts from the countless spirits that approached him the moment he arrived in Nineland, and assaulted his mansion. He had covered the entire building in a magic absorption barrier that ran along its walls before defeating the guild master. The guild master would probably have been a powerful foe if allowed to use magic, but inside the magic absorption barrier, he was nothing more than an old man. Well, after having flown such a long distance with his spirit form wings, it had cost Vandali the rest of his remaining mana to create the barrier, though. Braga, Zran and Eleonora had used physical attacks to defeat the mages who couldn't cast magic and the guild master's guards. After that, Vandali had thought hard about how to interrogate the stubborn guild master who possessed poison resistance, and decided to try using the mental encroachment skill. With that said, all he had done was make additional heads and stare directly into Guildmaster's eyes while whispering into both of his ears. For a mere hour. As a result, the Guildmaster had entered a vegetative state. Vandali had wondered whether it was alright to simply kill him after extracting information from him. Well, he did do a lot of bad things in order to learn forbidden knowledge from Turnisha, so I don't feel sorry for him at all, said Vandali. I am sorry. The mental encroachment skill is powerful but hard to hold back with. I have to practice properly with it, said Vandali. Strictly speaking, the effects produced by the skill were more due to the fact that Vandali himself had a personality of not forgiving his enemies rather than due to the special characteristics of the skill itself. However, I suppose it's fine since I got my hands on the Forbidden Archives, though, he decided. Vandali had used spirit form transformation on his entire body, used possession on the broken guild master and manipulated his body to successfully gain access to the Mages Guild's forbidden domain. Possession was a death attribute spell that he had recently invented. Rather than taking over someone, it was more like sharing their body. Normally, it wouldn't allow Vandali to steal control from the body's owner. However, he had been able to manipulate the body of the guildmaster whose will had collapsed. Thanks to this, he had gained forbidden knowledge at a bargain sale price. Well, it doesn't seem like he has any knowledge that will be immediately useful, though, Vandali said to himself. Ah, I found a way to create homunculi, reported one of Vandali's clones. But it seems that having a contract with an evil god is a requirement. A spell that controls the minds of others, its procedure is troublesome, so it's unnecessary considering I have the mental encroachment skill, said another. This poison is inferior to the poison I can already create, isn't it? Its mana cost is needlessly high, too. Just because it was forbidden knowledge didn't mean that all of it was useful. Much of the information here were things that Vandali was already capable of or inferior versions of things he could already do. Well, it probably couldn't be helped considering that death attribute magic had many spells that would themselves be considered forbidden techniques. But to think that spells artificially creating mutant variations of monsters would be considered forbidden, wouldn't I be arrested if people found out about the things I've done in Talersheim? Vandali wondered. No, I suppose it'd be fine as long as I'm not a member of the Mages Guild. Well, it just means that I can't join them, one of his clones added. To have to consider how narrow each guild's doors are, how sad. Of course, the Adventurers Guild here was the same as it was in the city of Niaki. Admission into the Mages Guild required the approval of an instructor or a letter of recommendation from a member of practitioner rank or greater, as well as from a nobleman. Alternatively, it required one to possess qualifications certifying graduation from a mage's school. The Workers' Guild required applicants to perform manual labor under an instructor or supervisor. The Commerce Guild required applicants to be prepared to conduct business and to pay an admission fee. The Tammers Guild required applicants to study under other members, have a recommendation or otherwise prove that they could indeed tame monsters to a guild staff member. Though their names differed a little, all of the guilds required the same things for registration. Among these, the one that Vandali could probably apply for was the Tammers Guild, but if he were to show off the fact that he had tamed monsters like Eleonora, a noble-born vampire, he would be noticed by the pure-breed vampire's subordinates who were still in Nineland. If he were to show off his zombie ninja, Titan, Zran, or Braga and the other black goblins, he would cause an uproar. There was also the option of simply creating a golem to demonstrate his ability, but then he might simply be called an alchemist. Registering at an adventurer's guild elsewhere after things have settled down is the most realistic option after all, Vandali concluded. I'll think about registering for the Tammers Guild and Commerce Guild after that. Well then, let's withdraw for now, said another of Vandali's clones. Vandali, who had cloned himself to search the forbidden archives, gathered all of the forbidden tomes and cursed items that appeared to be of value and began preparing to leave with them in hand. He had already used the allies of the pure-breed vampires, the higher-ranking members of the Mages Guild, as practice dummies for mental encroachment and turned them into vegetables. Still using possession on the guild master, he had summoned the mages one by one, telling them that there was something to discuss, brought the guild master's mouth close to their ears as if to whisper something confidential, undid the possession over the guild master and extended his narrow tongue into the mages' ears to administer poison and capture them. After that, he had used mental encroachment until they entered vegetative states. I always imagined mages to be mentally strong, though, said Vandali. Ordering them to carry forbidden tomes and cursed items outside of the forbidden archives hadn't been difficult. They were all important individuals, after all. I finally learned the whereabouts of the underground cemetery, so I suppose I'll start digging a tunnel tonight, Vandali decided. Chapter 79, Fanning the Flames in the Underground Graveyard. Gao groaned the final monster, a rank 7 poison zombie giant that was a combination of multiple poison zombies. Heinz, the man wielding the magic sword enveloped in blue flames that had cut the monster open, sighed as he confirmed that there were no more enemies. The monster, whose core had consisted of a middle-aged female zombie, had been conspicuously more powerful than the other monsters. It seems that the monster's rampage has ended. Is everyone alright? Heinz asked. Yeah, no problems here. I am tired though. I'm not hurt, either, but I'm tired, too. Heinz's party was severely exhausted. Most of the monsters that had appeared were rank 4 or 5, and the only rank 7 monster was the poison zombie giant that had been finished off a few moments ago. There had been just over 1,000 of them, a smaller number than the average monster rampage. They hadn't been enemies that the 5-colored blades, an A-class adventurer party, would have had trouble with. In fact, they were small fry that would simply be scattered aside in a one-sided fashion. Even if there were over 1,000 of them. That was the power of an A-class adventurer party. However, the monsters that had closed in on the city of Niaki were not ordinary monsters. 70% of the swarm of monsters had been undead, while the other 30% consisted of plant-type and insectoid monsters. And the monsters that possessed the body parts required for speech had been repeatedly groaning, "Kill Heinz," as if these words were some kind of incantation. A group of monsters led by a mighty commander with the title of king would move like a single creature, but this was a completely abnormal situation. With that said, this could actually be considered fortunate. The monsters hadn't been fixated on entering the city of Niaki. The guards, knights and adventurers had hastily formed a defensive force and risen to meet the monsters in battle, but the monsters had ignored the city and charged at Heinz, who had been standing at the forefront of the defense. Despite wounded, immobilized knights and completely exhausted adventurers being within their reach, they had continued aiming for Heinz. But all of the monsters had been more individually powerful than their ranks would have suggested, and no matter how many times they were defeated, they kept attacking endlessly. Defeated insectoid monsters had turned undead, mold and fungi had grown on the remains of defeated undead to spawn plant-type monsters such as poison mushrooms and venom molds, and the remains of plant-type monsters had spawned insects which turned into monsters. Thanks to this endless monster chain, Heinz and his companions had actually been forced to fight against over 10,000 monsters. Still, they seem to have hated you quite a lot. What have you done? Asked Jennifer, the unarmed human fighter. Us adventurers have defeated a countless number of monsters, so there could be any number of reasons as to why we could be hated, said Diana, an elf priestess of Mil, the goddess of slumber. But that was completely out of the ordinary, wasn't it? The two of them had joined Heinz's party after they moved to work in the Orborn Kingdom. Before responding to either of them, Heinz turned to look in the direction of the city of Niaki. Because the monsters had only been aiming for the 5 colored blades, for Heinz, the city's outer walls were unharmed, and although there were some among the defense force who were severely wounded, only a few truly unlucky individuals had perished. If I had to make a guess, I'd say it was the damp boy, said Heinz. The one who suddenly ran out of the Adventurers Guild. Do you remember doing something that would make him hate you? Jennifer asked. No, there isn't any connection between that boy and this monster rampage, is there? Said Diana. Heinz paused for a moment to figure out how to phrase his thoughts correctly before opening his mouth again. I don't think there is, either. But his name was Vandali. Jennifer and Diana blinked, not knowing what Heinz meant. Heinz wasn't sure of his own theory, either. But the name of the Dark Elf witch whom he had captured in the Mage Shield Nation was Darsa. That was an event that had occurred about 7 years ago. And what had been written on the registration form left on the counter in the Adventurers Guild, which had now been disposed of after it was rejected, was the name Vandali and an age of 7. It's possible that he was. You're overthinking it, Heinz. Edgar? No matter how you look at it, that damp wasn't the child of any dark elf, said Edgar. With how white his skin was, there's no way, right? You're just being too conscious of your sin, which is what's making you believe that. That might be true. The visible special characteristics of a damp are eyes with different colors, one of which is blood red, as well as fangs and retractable claws. Other than these, their characteristics are those that they inherit from their parents. If one parent of a damp is a dark elf, it should be impossible for that damp to have white, candle wax-like skin. And there was no way that a baby that was not even a year old at the time could have survived on its own in the wilderness. And how could it have crossed the boundary mountain range to escape to the Orborn Kingdom? I guess I'm overthinking it. And to think that I would suspect that damp to be connected to this monster rampage. It seems that I'm more tired than I thought. It's not like he's the second coming of the Demon King or anything like that. Heinz gave a wry smile as he mentioned a rumor that was being whispered at the Church of Elder recently. That's right, said Edgar. But despite his words, he made a note of investigating Vandali further once he returned to the city. If I recall, the information broker in the city of Niaki is run by an organization called the Fangs of Dark Knights. I suppose I'll try asking them. Edgar's actions would later bring an astonishing incident to light, revealing the fact that the organization had continued to operate after its leader and higher-ranking members had become undead. More importantly, after we get back to the city and have some rest, we need to go and find the dungeon that these monsters came from, said Jennifer. They came from a completely different direction from any known dungeons. So a new dungeon must have appeared. It might be Zakart's Trials. Zakart's Trials. A dungeon that first appeared 100 years ago. It appears somewhere on the continent without warning, only to disappear again about a month later. It is the world's only confirmed moving labyrinth. It is impossible to categorize its class, and nobody has ever entered and lived to tell the tale other than Heinz's party, the 5 colored blades, who managed to escape at the cost of one of their members. It is said that a treasure left behind by Zakart rests in its deepest chamber. According to another story, the undead form of Zakart himself awaits those worthy of challenging him, and the hero who defeats him will become a successor to the champion Bellwood. If that's true, we'll clear it for sure this time. For Marty's sake, too. But you're right. First, we need to go back to the inn where Selene is waiting, said Heinz, thinking of the damp girl who was awaiting their return. No, the report to the guild comes first. Yeah, I'll do it. Don't complain that I'm having the receptionist Nasan's attention all to myself, Edgar said with a wry smile. I see, that's terrible, unforgivable. Worthy of death, said Vandali. Vandali-sama, what is this all of a sudden? Eleonora asked. It's the members of the adventurer party, the Western Calm, the receptionist Arya-san, Hana-san and Hana-san's father. Vandali was currently digging a tunnel from the mansion of the guild master of the Mages Guild to beneath Duke Hartner's castle by turning the ground into golems and using golem transmutation to form a passage. He had left the black goblins and their lovers in the mansion, while the guildmaster and his subordinates who were now in vegetative states prepared a parting gift. Incidentally, the guildmaster's mansion had contained valuable items such as first-class staffs, but Vandali was still unarmed. If he, who possessed a monstrous amount of mana, were to use a staff designed for humans, he would have to exercise extreme care in casting spells, or the staff could explode, rot away or turn into dust. In order to use a staff that assisted with magic, Vandali would need to concentrate as if he were writing kanji in minuscule letters, so he didn't use them. Weren't there any staffs somewhere that were designed to be used by beings more powerful than humans? Leaving that aside, Vandali had begun talking to himself in the midst of creating this tunnel. But the eyes of Zran, who was undead, could see that Vandali had been surrounded by spirits in tragic states. They're part of the countless spirits that gathered around him when we came here, Zran murmured to himself. The ones near him now look like they've all died recently, though. Just like when he had arrived at the city of Niaki, all of the spirits in the capital city had flooded towards Vandali when he arrived here. There were so many of them that Zran couldn't hear what they were saying. However, the spirits that were currently speaking to Vandali looked a little different. Eleonora, Zran, if a black-haired, black-eyed man in his 30s by the name of Kaido Kanato appears, please leave things to me until I give you further commands, said Vandali. Kaido Kanata? Eleonora repeated. Could it be one of the scum who killed you in your previous life, Holy Son? That bastard. This is a great opportunity. Let's kill him, turn him into a zombie and hear everything he has to say, said Zran. Vandali had already heard information regarding Kaido Kanata from the spirits of his victims. According to them, Kanata had already come to Nineland, and although it was unclear as to how he knew where Vandali was, he was drawing closer. According to the other information given by the spirits, for some reason, swords, spears and spells hadn't worked on Kanata, while his attacks had passed straight through their armor to strike their bodies. He was a user of the unarmed fighting technique and short sword technique, as well as high-level fire attribute magic and wind attribute magic. The penetration ability must be the cheat-like ability he got from Rod Corti. He must have improved his affinity for the fire attribute and wind attribute in Origin. Unarmed fighting technique and short sword technique is from his experience in Origin, I suppose? Geez, so this is how it is for people who don't have curses. Considering that Vandali had relearned everything from scratch through hard work, he thought that it was rather unfair that Kanata possessed all these abilities. But for now, he prioritized pacifying Eleonora and Zran, whose expressions had become bloodthirsty. Their abilities in combat couldn't be matched by the average adventurer or knight, but cheat-like abilities were dangerous enough to overcome such differences in strength. That was why they were called cheat, after all. Like I said, leave things to me, said Vandali. If we're going to kill him, no, he's been indulging in unforgivable acts of violence, so I'm definitely going to kill him, but I want to do it myself. I can tell he's quite the scoundrel just from looking at those spirits, but is it really that bad? Zran asked. Quite, Vandali replied. To the point that I question his sanity. But Vandali felt more bewilderment than hatred upon learning about Kanata. To summarize Vandali's thoughts, he was basically wondering, what the hell is he doing? Kanata's acts were so cruel that they couldn't be considered the acts of a human, but more importantly, they were too reckless. He would simply kill, rape and steal if things became inconvenient, or he thought that doing things that way would be quicker. If he kept doing such things, even with a cheat-like ability, it would be impossible to live for very long. Vandali was far more curious about this than the fact that Kanata had a far more adult-like appearance than him despite him having been the first to die in Origin, or how Kanata knew where he was. Rod Corti probably had something to do with those, after all. For now, it seems certain that he has come to kill me, but let's make a habit of casting Detect Life periodically from now on, said Vandali. The work that Kanata had apparently mentioned was probably the task of killing Vandali. Vandali didn't really care. But why had he come to interfere now, of all times? It was good that he was aiming directly for Vandali rather than Braga and the others who were standing by in the Guildmaster's mansion, though. If I recall, those people were acting like allies of justice, weren't they? Said Eleonora. That's how allies of justice are, said Vandali. They'd be considered heroes from the point of view of the followers of Bellwood or Alder, but from our point of view, they're not. Indeed, you're right, Eleonora agreed. As they were conversing, Vandali and his companions arrived in the deepest part of Nineland. There was a dark stone corridor before them, and casting Detect Life ahead revealed no signs of human life. But Vandali's danger sense, death was giving a response. Is it a trap? Asked Zran. No, with this shape, it's probably a barrier, said Vandali. It's said that the champion left a barrier behind, too. Continuing from the tunnel into the corridor, Vandali fired some weak death bullets into a head into it. A wall of light appeared in a spot that previously had nothing there, emitting flashes of light and noises as it repelled the death bullets. This is the barrier left behind by the champion Ninarod. Eleonora murmured. It repelled the Holy Sun's death bullets. Zran exclaimed. Well then, I'm going to remove it now, said Vandali. Eh? Eleonora and Zran said in unison. That quickly? Right before the eyes of a surprised Eleonora and Zran, Vandali used his death attribute mana to steadily remove the champion's barrier. He wasn't doing anything difficult. He was simply applying a huge load that the barrier couldn't withstand, all at once, to break through it by force. Ninarod's barrier resisted for a few dozen seconds, but in the end, it fell apart with a sound similar to the noise of glass shattering. Phew, it was harder than Ice Age's ice, said Vandali. I used 300 million mana, too. Give me one of the obentos, please, he requested. Sure, Zran said with an astonished expression as he took out a flask from the luggage. It contained the fresh blood of the protégé bodyguard of the Mages Guild's guild master. He had apparently benefited plenty from the fact that his employer was working with the pure-breed vampires, so his blood was particularly delicious. Phew, having a drink after doing some hard work really is something, said Vandali. Vandali-sama, that, Eleonora began. Sounded like something that a middle-aged man would say? Vandali asked. No, it was like a child trying to do his best to push himself past his limit, so it was rather adorable. I see. With his shoulders dropping a little at Eleonora's words, Vandali started walking forward again without waiting for his mana to recover. He knew that Kanata was heading this way, but thanks to the automatic mana recovery skill, he was recovering more than 10,000 mana every second, so it wasn't a problem. Past the barrier, the corridor ended in an unimaginably enormous underground cemetery. There were holes of various sizes containing bones and shells. It was a sight that made it difficult to call this a holy place. The air lingering here was full of an unpleasant moisture and somehow felt sinister. Though there shouldn't have been any signs of life here, there were quiet noises that sounded like groans coming from somewhere. The princess isn't here, said Vandali. Oh, Lavia-sama. Zran called out. It's me, Zran. You can come out now. But Vandali couldn't see any vengeful ghosts or evil spirits. Nor could he see the first Princess Lavia. There might still be another barrier. It is not uncommon for there to be 2 or 3 barriers when something needs to be sealed inside, said Eleonora. As they heeded her words and looked around, they found something that did indeed resemble a barrier. A silver coffin bound by whips. This was likely the barrier's core. I wonder whose idea it was to do this, said Vandali. Ninarod was apparently a user of the whip technique, said Zran. Doesn't that explain it? By the way, what do you think is inside the coffin? Asked Eleonora. If it is a pure-breed vampire, then they might become a powerful ally or perhaps not. It might be a vampire who turned to the evil gods, after all. It would indeed be problematic if I were to undo the seal and someone we couldn't handle were to come out. Vandali agreed as he tentatively tried beginning to remove the seal, but there wasn't really any reaction from danger sense, death. Is it empty inside? It seems fine, so I'm removing the seal, he said. And then he began removing the barrier in the same way he removed the outside barrier earlier. Before he had even finished removing it, the whips snapped as the coffin opened forcefully from the inside. Vandali-sama. Eleonora cried. She and Zran tried to grab Vandali and retreat, but the red amoeba-shaped thing that had flown out of the coffin raised its head and looked down at Vandali, approaching him with incredible speed like a venomous snake. Gargle, gargle, gargle gulp. It was swallowed by Vandali. Eh? Zran and Eleonora said in unison, dumbfounded. Vandali finished drinking the coffin's contents, put his hands together, lowered his head and said, Goki Sauzuma. V Vandali-sama? What was that? Eleonora asked. More importantly, why did you swallow it? Why, you ask, it did enter my mouth, Vandali replied. No, you'd normally spit it out, right? Zran exclaimed. But I don't think it's good to leave food unfinished, said Vandali. Well, I suppose you wouldn't normally refer to blood that a champion sealed away 100,000 years ago as food. So at least you know. Wait, so that thing you just swallowed was blood? Zran shouted. Then could it possibly have been part of the Demon King? Asked Eleonora. It was a well-known story that the champions had defeated the Demon King Eugeranes, taken his body apart and sealed each part away individually. It was just blood, but considering that it had been sealed away, they couldn't think of anyone it could possibly belong to other than the Demon King. In fact, the announcer in Vandali's head had said, "You have absorbed the blood of the Demon King!" He had been wondering whether he should tell Zran and Eleonora, knowing that it would shock them. The blood-sucking skill has reached level 10. It has transformed into the superior skill, Bloodwork. The level of the Bloodwork, Death Attribute Magic, Superhuman Strength, Rapid Healing, Automatic Mana Recovery, Magic Resistance, Venom Secretion, Claws, Fangs, Tongue, Body Expansion, Tongue, skills have increased. You have acquired the title, the Second Coming of the Demon King? Vandali wanted to strongly protest to the last part, the title that he had gained. Who was the announcer calling the Second Coming of the Demon King? But vomit it out, you have to vomit it out, Holy Son. Vandali-sama, spit it out, spit. Zran had grabbed Vandali's legs and was now shaking him while holding him upside down, so he didn't have time. To think about this. No, but I've already absorbed, hello. As Vandali was being shaken up and down, perhaps because he had removed the champion's seal, he could now see countless ghosts. Upside down. Ghosts. Unlike the powerless spirits that could only be seen by Vandali, undead and spiritualists, these are beings that have turned into monsters without physical bodies. They are rank 2, and although most physical attacks are ineffective against them, they have no physical power of their own. But most of them still possess incomplete versions of the personalities and memories that they possessed in life. Who is it? A pawn of the Hartner family? No, this presence that is both terrifying and comforting, just what could it? Look at that titan. It's an undead. Why is an undead here? The barrier has been broken. Are we going to be set free? The semi-transparent ghosts with blurry outlines, whose legs were missing below their knees, were whispering amongst themselves. Vandali couldn't feel any hostility from them, but he could sense that they were frightened. Zran unconsciously let go of Vandali's legs and began shouting in the ghost's direction. Livia-sama, is Livia-sama here? I'm Zran of Talersheim. Vandali, who had quickly been caught by Eleonora, saw a female ghost with long hair extending past her waist, floating to the front. Livia-sama. Zran exclaimed. Zran, I remember you. A scout warrior, the most proficient in the use of short swords among our race. Zran hadn't been intimate with Princess Livia, nor had he served in a position close to her. But in the city of Talersheim, with a population of only 5,000 and society with loose hierarchies, exceptional warriors would have had opportunities to meet the princess in person. Zran was a scout, the kind of fighter that titans lacked most, so it seemed that he had been easier to remember than others. You remained in Talersheim with Zandia and the others to fight until the very end, so why are you here? Asked Livia. But now that you have been sealed in here, you are prisoners like us. We are forced to wander this place, unable to return to the goddess's side or rid ourselves of our regrets. I've removed the barrier, said Vandali. Indeed, as long as the two barriers that have been set up are not removed. Livia stopped speaking for a moment. They have been removed? Yes. I'm sorry for the late introduction. I'm Vandali, the current king of Talersheim. And so, Vandali introduced himself, still being held upside down in the position that Eleonora had caught him in. After hearing Vandali's explanation and seeing the rock salt originating from Karen's Valley that he had brought from Talersheim, Livia completely believed in his words. It would have been problematic if she had refused to believe him, so Vandali felt relieved. I see, said Livia. Everyone who stayed behind in Talersheim was valiant until the very end. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for leading Borkus and the others, and for protecting my homeland. But despite that, I was unable to protect everyone. It's not your fault, Livia-sama. Zran exclaimed. The ones at fault are those traitors of the Hartner family. When Princess Livia and her small escort force escaped from Talersheim into the Hartner Duchy, they had been warmly welcomed by Duke Hartner and the inhabitants of the city that was now in ruins. But Duke Hartner poisoned the meal that had been prepared for the Titans. None of the Titans, who had believed that the Hartner family was a sworn ally, doubted the Duke. They ate their meals, swallowed the poison. Although they tried to resist after that, they were captured by the Duke's knights and the mages who served him, and Princess Livia's guards were slain on the spot. Princess Livia herself was accused of plotting to kill the Duke and burned at the stake. and then her remains had been buried beneath this underground barrier. I learned of what happened after that from those who were buried here like us and gained a good understanding of things, she said. The knights and mages who killed us were also killed and buried here to ensure their silence, you see. Apparently, the Duke at the time had been exceptional when it came to conspiracy. He hadn't left anyone involved alive. Perhaps old Lady Milan of the city of Niyaki had heard the story from the wandering spirits who had managed to escape before being imprisoned here. So, about what comes next, said Vandali, changing the subject. It does not even need to be said by someone who no longer belongs in this world. The right to Taylersheim's throne is yours. Please save everyone and guide them. Livia lowered her head towards Vandali. Each of her movements was so elegant that it was difficult to believe that she didn't have a physical body. And yet, there was no trace of pride in her actions. So, this is what a graceful princess is like, Vandali thought. She was a titan, so she was still 2 meters tall despite having half of her legs missing, however. Her appearance was blurred now, but she had probably been a beautiful princess when she was alive. With this, we can all return to the goddess's side, she said. Ah, please wait. Vandali stopped her, though this beauty wasn't the reason that he did so. I need your help to save everyone at the slave-run mine, he said. My help? Livia repeated. But I am not capable of doing anything significant as I am now. We don't need you to, Eleonora told her. What is important is for you to cooperate with Vandali-sama and be seen doing so. Of course, the Titans being held captive in the slave-run mines knew nothing about Vandali and the current Taylersheim. Most importantly, death attribute charm wouldn't work on them, so even if Vandali were to tell them, I've come from Taylersheim to save you, there was a high chance that they wouldn't believe him. Even if the undead Titans like Zran and Borkus convinced them, they would still have their doubts. They might believe the words of their families or relatives, but if they weren't closely related to the undead Titans, they might simply think that the Titans had gone mad after becoming undead. The teachings of the goddess Veda said that undead should be treated with open-mindedness, but not that undead should be befriended without question. Of course, there was the option of ignoring the feelings of the captive slaves and dragging them to Taylersheim by force before explaining things, but if they resisted unexpectedly and there were injuries or casualties, it would leave a bad aftertaste. It would be possible to turn them into undead, but if it was possible to prevent them from dying in the first place, that would be best. That was where Princess Livia came in. She had led the Titans 200 years ago. Even though she had turned into a ghost, her words would probably reach them. At the very least, you should be able to make them listen to us, said Eleonora. But why would they listen to the words of someone who failed to protect everyone? And I no longer have any regrets or grudges needed to bind me to this world, said Livia. My heart has already been saved. Your son will surely be able to free the slaves and, son? Eleonora repeated. No, I'm not Vandali-sama's parent. Is that all right with you? Asked Vandali, interrupting Eleonora who seemed to have been mistaken for his parent because he was a damp. What do you mean? Asked Livia. Are you all right with simply forgiving them? The ones who killed your guards and warriors and shut you in here for 200 years. The ones who unjustly took your people as captives and continued to exploit them for 200 years. Are you all right with the decision of not releasing your anger, resentment and hatred? That is Livia's voice trembled. The Titan ghosts behind her appeared to waver as they trembled as well. When they had been killed 200 years ago, when they had learned that their people had been taken to the slave-run mines, they felt anger, resentment and hatred towards the Hartner family, just as Vandali said. They had cursed their betrayal, screamed that they would never forget this grudge and seethed with hatred. To the point that the tiny amount of the Demon King's mana leaking from the seal had reacted to it, turning them into ghosts. But vengeance is, Livia began. A reasonable act, said Vandali, interrupting her. Especially in this case. I'm not telling you to take your hatred of 200 years ago and take it out on the people living today, he continued, looking directly into the eyes of Livia and the other ghosts. I'm only telling you to use your current hatred and take it out on today's people. Vandali conveyed to them the anger, resentment and hatred that he felt, awakening their own anger, resentment, hatred and regret. It's only natural to be angry, to resent, to hate. It's normal for any person. Someone you trusted betrayed you, showed contempt for you and robbed you of your lives. People important to you were unfairly turned into prisoners and exploited for 200 years. If you feel nothing towards those who did this, I can only say that you have gone mad, said Vandali. Natural normal. What did you feel when you realized that your food had been poisoned, When your guards were killed, when you were burned alive? Asked Vandali. Back then, inside you, there should be resentment, anger and hatred. Let it burn once more. Inside me, our anger, my resentment, even ghosts that were completely unrelated were stirring, but Vandali took no notice of them as he continued. Please lend me your strength, he said. In order to take back what was taken from us. As he finished speaking, there was the sound of an igniting spark as light and heat spread across the underground graveyard that had been in complete darkness a moment ago. I've remembered, my anger, my resentment. Livia cried. Moving on without ridding ourselves of this hatred is impossible. Isn't that right, everyone? Princess Livia was burning. Not metaphorically, but literally. Her unreliable-looking spirit-form body was now shining red, and her outlines and the details of her face were now clearly visible. She looked just like a goddess of fire, with hair and a dress made of flames. You have acquired the dead spirit magic skill. That's right, that's exactly right. We cannot disappear until we deliver a calamity upon the Hartner family that has scorned and tormented us. They'll feel my wrath for playing around with us and throwing us away. Don't underestimate the maid. Kai. There were some ghosts getting fired up who were not among the victims of the Hartner family, but Vandali took no notice of this. All of the ghosts in the underground graveyard were burning, as if surrounded in flames. Did their ranks increase? But just how? Zran wondered. No, I suppose it doesn't matter. In any case, it seems that Livia-sama and everyone else is going to stay to help us. Vandali had used the mental encroachment skill to share his feelings of defeat with Livia and the others, setting alight the feelings of defeat that they themselves had once felt. Influenced by Livia, who had been burned at the stake, they had become rank 3 fire ghosts while Livia herself had become a rank 4 flame ghost. It was a phenomenon that would cause an uproar if witnessed by researching mages and scholars of the Mages Guild. Vandali-sama has become an even greater figure, said Eleonora. Isn't that just fine? I suppose you're right, said Zran. And so, this phenomenon was brushed aside just like that. Well, Vandali himself was also very surprised at the way Princess Livia and the other ghosts had gotten so fired up. He had shared his feelings of hatred and anger that felt like they were burning his body, but he hadn't expected them to actually burn. He wasn't surprised enough to forget about everything else, though. Now then, let's get going and save everyone, said Livia. Sorry, but there's a matter that I have to deal with first. Instead of taking Livia's burning hand, Vandali turned around to look towards the corridor that he had come through. There was a man in his 30s with black hair and black eyes standing there, his empty hands raised in the air. Wait. Listen to what I have to say. I'm sorry for what I did back then, please forgive me, said Kaida Kanata. He kneeled before Vandali, pressing his head against the dusty floor. Title explanation, Second Coming of the Demon King, a title that indicates the second coming of the Demon King. One must not only be recognized as such, but also be able to perform the same feats as the Demon King Yujuron is, in order to gain this title. For example, breaking souls, generating new races of monsters and creating dungeons. It is also possible to gain this title by taking in, absorbing or being taken in by a part of the Demon King. Those who acquire this title gain bonuses to various techniques that are considered forbidden techniques and evil knowledge, as well as to the aforementioned acts that are part of the conditions of gaining the title. The ability of creating and altering new races of monsters receives a particularly large bonus. Princess Livia and her companions becoming a flame ghost and fire ghosts is another example of this. However, this does not allow unconditional creation and alteration of new monsters. There are fine conditions and affinities for this that need to be considered. Chapter 80, The Man Who Comes to an End with His Third Time. Kanata, who knew that Vandali was headed for the area beneath the castle through his target radar, clicked his tongue in frustration. In an underground area with limited space, he couldn't use his abilities to their full potential. If he were to release his magic with full power, his own life would be endangered by a cave-in. Even if he used Gungna to pass through the dirt, he wouldn't be able to do anything about the lack of oxygen. And the gun that he was so proficient with in Lambda, it had become archery, but he could imagine that it would be difficult to fire underground, where there would be many obstacles. He could use Gungna to make the arrows he fired pass through such obstacles, but his eyes wouldn't be able to see through them. That was why he had used infrared scopes and detection spells to identify his target's locations in origin, But infrared scopes didn't exist in Lambda, and if he recited an incantation for a detection spell, there was a chance that Vandali would sense it and Kanata would be the one being located. Thinking that there was no other choice, Kanata had given up on sniping Vandali from afar and started to think about a close-range assassination. He had decided to continue with the plan of attacking Vandali here rather than waiting for another opportunity with better conditions for the assassination or creating a better plan to create such conditions. He knew that Vandali's mobility was superior to his, so there was a chance that Vandali would simply run away, but the bigger reason was that he wanted to get this job over and done with so he could begin his fourth life. And in order to purify the spirits haunting him, although at this point, they had already left him to go to Vandali, he had poured holy water, which he had obtained from one of the female adventurers he had raped, over himself. The moment he had on-target radar and used Gungna to pass through the walls and floor to get underground, he had realized that Vandali had noticed him. It wasn't a skill that told him this. Despite being a degenerate individual, he was an experienced combatant who had been through countless battles to the death. It was his instincts that told him that he had been noticed. Wait. Listen to what I have to say. I'm sorry for what I did back then, please forgive me. Having revealed himself faster than he had planned, Kanata kneeled on the ground. He's bigger than the information that the god gave me would suggest. And he's got so many monsters with him that I have no information about. What are those things that look like flaming people? Kanata performed a desperate-looking apology. But Vandali, who seemed to have gained many pawns, was being held in contempt in Kanata's mind for having an interest in such bizarre creatures. What are you playing at? Vandali asked. Kanata could feel his heart applauding the fact that Vandali had chosen to engage in conversation rather than attacking. He's naive after all, Kanata thought. Don't you remember what happened in Origin? I'm Kaido Kanata. I was one of the students from the same high school as you, said Kanata. Of course, Vandali, who had already heard Kaido Kanata's name from the spirits, had a good idea of who he was. There wouldn't be anyone in Lambda with the surname Kaido, after all. Even if that weren't the case, everything about Kanata's words and actions were too strange, so Vandali hadn't been able to imagine that Kanata was anything but someone who had reincarnated from Origin. I'm one of the people who accidentally defeated you at the research laboratory back then, Kanata continued. Come to think of it, I do get the feeling that you were there, said Vandali. He was hearing this for the first time. Back then, his eyes had only been looking at Naru's Narumi and the more familiar looking among his former classmates, those whose names he hadn't even remembered, like Kanata, hadn't lingered in his memories. Kanata was a little bewildered at Vandali's reaction, which had been weaker than he had expected, but he began speaking more smoothly now. We didn't know that you were one of us back then. I'm really sorry, so please forgive me, he said. If you can't forgive me, then I don't mind being killed by you. But won't you at least spare the others? Sure, said Vandali. I'm begging, eh? I mean that I'm accepting your apology for killing me in Origin. Kanata raised his head without thinking and saw Vandali's emotionless eyes. The one at fault is Rod Corti, and as long as they apologize like you're doing now, then I'm alright with that, said Vandali. As long as they don't interfere with me or my companions, I won't get involved with them. I have a mountain of things that I want to do and things that I need to do, so I don't have time for that. Even now, he had to go and save the titans that were being made to work in the slave-run mines. He didn't care about the others who would reincarnate from Origin as long as they didn't harm them, apart from Kanata. These were Vandali's true thoughts. In fact, being invited to be their companion or them becoming his allies would be more troublesome. No matter how Vandali thought about it, their senses of values wouldn't match. He would consider it if they were willing to acknowledge each zombie and skeleton as an individual and respect them as such, however. It was probably impossible, though. On Earth and in Origin, raising the dead as undead was generally considered to be desecration of the dead. In many stories, including the stories told by every religion, there were only tragic endings unless the undying were buried immediately. Situations were frequently seen in the movies and games of Earth where characters would say, "That's not the real him anymore," as they fired a bullet into the zombie's head. Such situations would likely become reality if the others were to try to join Vandali. Wouldn't they only accept the use of undead as weapons at best? Such people would be too dangerous to allow near Taylorsheim. Is that right? Said Kanata. All right. I'll make sure to tell everyone else, too. Anyone who interferes with you is barrier. Kanata quickly pulled the trigger of the crossbow that he had been keeping hidden inside the floor with Gungna. No matter how Vandali answered, Kanata had been planning to find an opening and shoot him to death anyway. The bolt fired from the crossbow passed straight through the barrier that Vandali had put up instinctively, grazed his ear and bounced loudly off the wall behind him. The bolt hadn't missed. Vandali had dodged it. "I see," he said. "Your cheat-like ability is penetration not only through physical objects, but it can even penetrate my barrier." Kanata had been certain that his surprise attack would go well, but now his face stiffened at how easily Vandali had avoided it. But Vandali's danger sense, death had been reacting long before Kanata had even bowed before him. That was why Vandali had been staring intently at Kanata. Kanata had only thought that there was an opening because he had been unable to read Vandali's expressionless face. And Vandali had actually heard from the spirits that Kanata's cheat-like ability was a penetration ability, so he'd already had a good idea of what was coming. At the very least, he had known that Kanata wasn't an enemy that he could let down his guard against just because there were obstacles and barriers between them. Kanata clicked his tongue again. Dance, sash of flames. Recovering from his shock, he conjured flames to obstruct the view of Vandali and his allies. "Bastard!" Zran shouted. "Zran, Eleonora, just like I said earlier, leave things to me because I want to know what kind of power I can expect from those who reincarnated from origin like me," said Vandali. "Also, I have to test my new skill." Vandali instantly extinguished the raging flames with heat leech. He used his tongue and claws to secrete a highly volatile poison that wouldn't work on undead like Zran or those with the status effect resistance skill like Eleonora, and then chased after Kanata. Floor, ground. Kanata used Gungnir to hide inside the floor, realizing that Vandali was faster than he had expected. But Vandali instantly turned the floor around Kanata as well as the ground beneath into golems. "Move out of the way," he ordered them. Death bullet. He fired death bullets at Kanata's location, which he had determined with detect life. Gwa? He's fast. Though Kanata was astonished as the ground surface that he was using as a shield moved, he moved out of the way. The death bullets grazed him, but he managed to avoid a direct hit. Considering that the death bullets contained enough mana to cause instant death even with a graze, Vandali felt a little surprised to see Kanata still moving around quickly. And it seemed that his poison was ineffective. Judging by the speed of your movements and the power of your spells, your attribute values seem to be around the same as mine or a little higher. "You don't look like someone who would possess an unimaginable amount of vitality," said Vandali. "Did Rod Corti give you some resistance skills or something?" "Great burning destruction, mana." Without answering Vandali's question, Kanata cast a large-scale fire attribute spell. It was a spell that produced high temperatures to incinerate everything within its large area of effect. You'd normally be able to block it with that barrier and his heat-leeching spell, but I even used Gungnir after casting this spell. You can't block this scorching heat, so stay quiet and turn into ash along with the pieces of trash behind you. Certain of his victory, Kanata held his breath. Once the flames had subsided to some extent, he undid Gungnir and used wind attribute magic to create air to breathe. As long as Vandali was dead, his job was complete, so he was intending to commit suicide in order to live the fourth life that he would be rewarded with. But he wasn't thoughtless enough to die without confirming that he had accomplished his mission. To think that you would even get caught up in your own spell. You're making some bold moves. Vandali was standing there with a calm expression, still surrounded in flames. "Jesus!" Kanata shouted. "What kind of sorcery is this?" "It's just that these ladies protected me," said Vandali. "These ladies?" Kanata didn't understand, but as the flames surrounding Vandali died down, he could see the silhouettes of several women. Their faces looked familiar to him. Those beaches. Damn it, I poured holy water over myself for nothing. Kanata cursed. The women whose bodies were made of flames, including Hannah, were those that Kanata had killed after reincarnating in Lambda. "You never made those undead in origin or this world." Kanata shouted. "I just became able to make them a short while ago," said Vandali. "I suppose I'll name this, Embrace of the Flame Spirits." Behind Vandali, Zran and Eleonora had also been protected by the fire ghosts. They had expressions of agreement on their faces. "Someone like him isn't even a worthy enemy for Vandali-sama," said Eleonora. "You're right about that," Zran agreed. "I feel foolish for panicking about him." As they said, what was happening between Vandali and Kanata could no longer be called a fight to the death. Vandali was one-sidedly driving Kanata into a corner. "Can you do it like this?" Vandali asked. "Leave it to us." Obeying the will in the manner that Vandali transferred to them, the fire ghosts, the dead spirits of flames, attacked Kanata. Some of them became flaming spears, some crawled like snakes, and others still transformed into giant skulls, moving to scorch Kanata with their dark red flames. This was the effect of the dead spirit magic skill that Vandali acquired a short while ago. One might assume that dead spirit magic would be similar to the skills that allowed him to manipulate dead bodies and turn them into zombies and skeletons. However, it was effectively a skill similar to spiritual magic. Just as spiritual mages would transfer their mana and their will to spirits, allowing them to cast spells more efficiently than simply using magic of one of the attributes, Vandali transferred his mana and his will to the dead spirits and had them cast spells on his behalf. The fire ghosts, which had been charmed by his death attribute charm, attacked their enemy, Kanata, with no mercy. Kanata tried to avoid them at first, but the fire ghosts had all changed their shapes to become spears, snakes and skulls made of flames. No matter how much he avoided them, they chased him persistently. Flames, wind, Ga? Kanata's incantation was interrupted by his own scream. Why can't I pass through them? Unable to withstand the persistent chase of the fire ghosts, Kanata had tried to pass through them with Gungnir and attack with wind attribute magic, but against his expectations, the dark red flames had wrapped around his body and begun to burn him rather than passing through. Ground. Kanata tried to escape beneath the ground's surface, but his legs didn't sink at all. What the hell? Why isn't my Gungnir activating? It is, Vandali told him. But it's called Gungnir, is it? That penetration ability just can't pass through spirit form. Kanata's Gungnir was an ability that allowed him to penetrate anything he designated as a target. If he designated weapons as a target, not only would his enemies' weapons pass through him, but his own weapons would slip through his fingers and fall to the ground. Vandali had more or less figured this out from what the spirits had told him. Kanata had apparently fought bare-handed when he had designated weapons as the ability's target, and there were numerous similar examples in his use of Gungnir as well. That was why Vandali used the one thing Kanata couldn't slip through. Spirit form. Spirit form was something that resided within the bodies of all living creatures, including humans. If Kanata were to use Gungnir to pass through it, this would be an act equivalent to his physical body discarding his spirit and soul. It would be no different from committing suicide. It was something that Kanata's instincts prevented him from doing. That was why Kanata couldn't avoid the attacks of the fire ghosts, whose spirit form bodies themselves were burning. And Vandali had used spirit form transformation on a part of his physical body, extended it behind the walls, floors and ceiling, and used materialization. I have some other attacks that you can't pass through, too, said Vandali. For example, ! Vandali pursed his lips and released a scream directed in Kanata's direction. Kanata, who was struggling to withstand the fire ghost's attacks with his fire attribute resistance and wind attribute resistance and somehow trying to make a counterattack, took a direct hit and let out a scream as he covered his ears. My ears. His mental corruption mostly blocked Vandali's mental encroachment, but scream was a skill rather than a spell. Thus, it was impossible for Kanata to block the direct attack on his sense of hearing. The harsh noise that sounded like fragments of glass being grinded against each other. This was another of Gungnir's weaknesses. If Kanata were to designate sound as a target, he wouldn't be able to recite any incantations himself. He couldn't designate sound as a target for Gungnir if he intended to cast spells. Also, your final weakness is, as Kanata suffered with blood pouring out of his ears, Vandali approached him defenselessly. Mana. Kanata drew his knife with his burnt, blistered hand and threw it at Vandali as his only way to recover from this hopeless situation. Vandali effortlessly deflected it with his claws. No matter what kind of attacks you use, you can't designate your enemy's body as a target for your ability. If you did, you wouldn't be able to harm them, after all, said Vandali. That's why I can just use my physical body to protect myself. Of course, my claws. Kanata shouted, throwing another knife. This time, Vandali struck it down with his extended tongue. Even if you designate my claws as a target, I can simply use parts other than my claws to defend, said Vandali. Well, I wouldn't die from a knife of that size hitting me, anyway, he added, speaking with his tongue extended out of his mouth and twisting around. As his skill had leveled up, he was now able to extend it even further. This time, Kanata was lost for words. Well, in summary, you showed off your cheat-like ability too much, when you're supposed to use it to kill the enemy the first time he sees it, Vandali concluded. Also, why aren't you using martial skills? If you did, you might have been able to put up a better fight. If Kanata hadn't killed anyone or used Gungnir before attempting to kill Vandali, he probably wouldn't have suffered such an utter defeat. If he had used martial skills, there might have been a chance for him to kill Vandali. At the very least, he wouldn't have had his knife deflected by Vandali's tongue. Truly exasperated, Vandali transferred his mana to Livia and all of the fire ghosts, including Kanata's victims. I don't mind stabbing him with my tongue to finish him off, but can you do it? He asked them. Yes, everyone, aid me. Livia cried. With her dress of dark red flames expanding, she closed in on Kanata. Jih. Livia's appearance changed in an instant, she turned into restraints that bound Kanata down in a crucified position. Starting from his legs, the dead began crawling their way up his body. An unsightly scream came from Kanata's mouth. Burning funeral, you seem to possess fire attribute resistance, but it appears that it is working against you now, said Vandali. It's extremely painful and agonizing, isn't it? But you won't be able to die so quickly. This isn't what I was told. Kanata screamed in his mind as his entire body burned little by little. Why is this guy stronger than me when I was forced to go through harsh army training in Origin? Why can he dodge my knives so easily? He doesn't even feel any unrest or fear? He's a guy who spent 20 years in Origin as a guinea pig. Weakened, my ass. Isn't he way more troublesome than when he was an undead? I have a body that can't be affected by disease or poison, but I'm still so powerless against him. Kanata had assumed that he had known everything about Vandali from using his own common sense to interpret the information that Rod Corti had given him, but this had turned out to be a mistake. The information that Rod Corti had given Kanata was only information that applied at the time he had gathered it. And that information had been gained by looking through the eyes of others. He had essentially watched a documentary with no commentary. It wasn't information that he had gathered firsthand. Vandali had continued growing up. No commentary, it wasn't information that he had gathered firsthand. Vandali had continued growing after this, and he had undergone much harsher experiences after reincarnating in Lambda than Kanata ever had. Meanwhile, Kanata hadn't put in any effort after reincarnating in Lambda. He had no job and his attribute values were just a little above those of the average individual who has leveled one common job from level 0 to 100. Kanata's mana had already run out, he had no means of escape. He had no choice but to simply wait until he became a burned corpse. But even so, Kanata didn't think back and regret his actions. For him, this wasn't the end. Damn it. He screamed. But don't get so full of yourself, you necrophile bastard. You thought you'd be able to turn me into an undead and make me talk, right? Hi, too bad for you. What are you talking about? Asked Vandali. Those of us who are being reincarnated here, even if we die, we can return to the god before you can turn us into undead. No matter how many times you kill us, there'll be no end. We'll just have the god reincarnate us over and over, and we'll definitely kill you. Kanata screamed. Kanata had no intention of dying quietly and giving up on his reward. He intended to request Rod Corti for another chance to get revenge on Vandali, who was looking down on him despite being a dropout of a reincarnated individual, and next time, he would certainly receive his reward, the fourth life that he had been promised. I won't let my guard down next time. He shouted. I won't face you alone, either. I'll cooperate with the others and we'll torture you before we kill you. The god promised a fourth life full of luxury to anyone who kills you, so everyone will be aiming for you. Even Amamiya, even Naruse. Vandali's tongue, which had still been extended outside, loosened and returned to the inside of his mouth. Taking this as a sign that Vandali's mind had broken, Kanata felt such joy that he forgot the pain of his body being burned. Prepare Elf. After I kill you, I'll kill those women around you, Sharp tongue. There was a wet-sounding noise that was lost in Kanata's scream of resentment, as well as the sound of a crack appearing in a hard object. From Kanata's point of view, it appeared as if Vandali's tongue had pierced his chest. But there was no blood. Confused, he wondered whether he had accidentally used Gungnir, but Vandali returned his tongue to his mouth and continued speaking. I just used my spirit form tongue to break your soul, he said. It's my first time doing it with my tongue, so I couldn't break it into pieces with a single attack. But I put a deep crack in it, so I'm sure it will break soon. Eh? Huh? My soul? Kanata repeated blankly. In other words, you are finished here. There won't be anything after your death, no reincarnation, no fourth life. You're lying. There's no way such a thing, Gah. Kanata's face turned pale for the first time as he was consumed by a pain completely different from that of his body being seared by flames. The pain was intense, but he couldn't tell which part of his body was hurting. The god, Gah, didn't mention anything about. Kanata's body was still resisting the flames, but the crack in the important thing that made up the being Kai to Kanata grew deeper and wider. So, you didn't know about it after all, said Vandali. If you did, you wouldn't have said the stupid things you said just a moment ago. Well, even if you didn't say them, I did intend to break your soul anyway. Kanata had been panicked and flustered up to this point, but he hadn't felt the raw despair that his face was filled with now. No, stop it. How can you do such a horrible thing? He cried. To think that there's nothing left in the future for me. I still have a lot of things I want to do. I don't want to die. Please spare me. Kanata screamed, feeling the terrifying sensation of his very being collapsing steadily. Vandali gave a deep sigh. Everyone thinks that, he said. Including the people that you've killed and even the people that I've killed. Life isn't a game that you can reset, you know? You should have faced reality a little more. For Vandali, who was doing his utmost to live his third life in Lambda because he didn't want a fourth one, the way Kanata lived was worthy of scorn. Kanata felt anger take over his entire consciousness as he realized that there was contempt for him somewhere in the depths of Vandali's expressionlessness. Damn it. I'll take you with me, you shitty failure of a bastard. Using the assignable active skill in his status that he had made fun of for being like something out of a game, Kanata acquired the surpass limits skill at level 5. Using this to overcome his limits, Kanata tried to deal Vandali a blow in return, but Paya! Letting out a comical noise. His head went limp and fell back against the ground. Though his heart was still beating, he was now completely motionless. Princess Sama, said Vandali. He transferred Manu to Livia, who used it to burn Kanata's head clean off. Kanata's decapitated head with a scorched, black neck rolled across the floor. Not only Livia, but Vandali, who had been making little progress lately, suddenly leveled up with this influx of experience points. You have acquired the strengthened attack power while unarmed, small, and enhanced physical ability, claws, fangs, tongue, skills. The levels of the enhanced agility, commanding, dead spirit magic and godslayer skills have leveled up. Name, Vandali. Race, Damper. Dark Elf. Age, 7 years old. Title: Ghoul King, Eclipse King, Second Coming of the Demon King, Taboo Name. Job, Venom Fist. User level, 100. Job history, Death attribute Mage, Golem Transmuter, Undead Tamer, Soulbreaker attributes, Vitality, 344 Mana, 379,120,344 Strength, 188 Agility, 251 Stamina, 159 Intelligence, 784 Passive Skills, Superhuman Strength, Level 4, Level Up. Rapid Healing, Level 6, Level Up. Death Attribute Magic, Level 7, Level Up. Status Effect Resistance, Level 7 Magic Resistance, Level 4, Level Up. Dark Vision Death Attribute Charm, Level 7 Chant Revocation, Level 4 Strengthen Followers, Level 8 Automatic Mana Recovery, Level 6, Level Up. Strengthen Subordinates, Level 4 Venom Secretion, Claws, Fangs, Tongue, Level 4, Level Up. Enhanced Agility, Level 2, Level Up. Body Expansion, Tongue, Level 4, Level Up. Strengthened Attack Power while unarmed, Small, New. Enhanced Physical Ability, Claws, Fangs, Tongue, Level 1, New. Active Skills, Bloodwork, Level 2, Transformed from Bloodsucking. Surpass Limits, Level 6 Golem Transmutation, Level 6 No Attribute Magic, Level 5 Mana Control, Level 4 Spirit Form, Level 7 Carpentry, Level 4 Engineering, Level 3 Cooking, Level 4 Alchemy, Level 4 Unarmed Fighting Technique, Level 5 Soul Break, Level 6 Multicast, Level 5 Long Distance Control, Level 6 Surgery, Level 3 Parallel Thought Processing, Level 5 Materialization, Level 4 Coordination, Level 3 High Speed Thought Processing, Level 3 Commanding, Level 2, Level Up. Farming, Level 3 Clothing, Level 2 Throwing, Level 3 Scream, Level 3 Dead Spirit Magic, Level 2, New. Unique Skills, Godslayer, Level 4, Level Up. Grotesque Mind, Level 4 Mental Encroachment, Level 3 Labyrinth Construction, Level 4 Curses, experience gained in previous life not carried over, cannot learn existing jobs, unable to gain experience independently. Despite having a degenerate nature, Kanata was someone who had been granted cheat-like abilities by the god of reincarnation. It seemed that such beings yielded an amount of experience points that couldn't be compared to normal monsters or humans. Vandali-sama, there are 99 remaining, aren't there? Said Eleonora. Even cheat-like abilities are no match for the Holy Sun, said Zran. At this rate, won't you eliminate them all before you need to become a nobleman? We will be your arms and legs and fight for you, our new king, said Livia. Everyone was excited over the fact that Vandali had so one-sidedly defeated someone from another world with cheat-like abilities, who was supposed to have been a powerful foe. But Vandali himself remained calm. No, I won't necessarily be killing the other 99, he said. There might be people who don't want to fight me, after all. But this scum, said Eleonora muttered. We can't trust the words of such scum, said Vandali. Among the things that Kanata had said, Vandali didn't really believe the parts about the others who would reincarnate here. Vandali didn't know what kind of social position Kanata had in origin, nor did he know of his relationships with the others reincarnated by Rod Corti. But judging from his actions and words, it was difficult to believe that he had been an important figure. Even if he did have some close friends, they were probably few in number. The others who would reincarnate here would probably already know, or soon know, about Kanata's demise and the fact that Vandali was the one who had caused it, but wouldn't there be some who changed their opinions given this information? Other than keeping quiet about my soul break, I think Rod Corti is underestimating me when he tells the others about me. With that being the case, the fact that I've destroyed Kanata should be enough to make the others reconsider coming after me. Of course, there would be some among them that would criticize Vandali for having broken Kanata's soul. Even if he told them about the inhuman things that Kanata had done, there might be some with flowery ideals in their heads insisting that Kanata was still a human. It was unlikely that all of them would be like that, however. For now, we'll deal with the others reincarnating here with the same policy as we've done up until now. But what should we do if they all reincarnate here with adult bodies? Vandali wondered. If they were all to start in this world with no bonds with other people, the efforts that Vandali was planning to make in order to become an honorary nobleman, gain societal fame and create circumstances where it would be difficult to lay a hand on him, it won't be pointless, will it? Said Zran. If you become great before them, Holy Sun, even if they act like heroes and try to find faults with you, those around you will be your allies. Indeed, Eleonora agreed. Even if they have incredible skills, if it comes down to choosing between people whose identities and origins are unknown and a well-known person, people will normally support the well-known person, won't they? Eh? You already rule Taylorsheim, yet you want to become even greater? Asked Livia. You are an unexpectedly ambitious individual. Our new king intends to reign supreme over this world. No wonder there's a god sending assassins after him. We have already perished. If we can become the cornerstones for our king's rule, nothing would make us happier. Princess Livia and the ghosts of her bodyguards were stirring in excitement. It seemed that Vandali needed to discuss things with them a little more. Wait, I don't have any intentions of reigning supreme or ruling the world, he said. For now, we'll destroy this place so that people don't make a fuss over the seal on the Demon King's blood being removed. Make it look like this guy on the ground here was the one who did it, and I suppose we'll stop by the treasury where the treasures stolen from Princess Livia are being kept before we return. It would be bad if it became known that Vandali and his companions had infiltrated the castle and removed the seal on the Demon King's blood, but with that said, slaughtering everyone in Duke Hartner's castle wasn't a good idea, either. Vandali decided to be satisfied with these measures. Well then, tomorrow night, let's fly to the city ruins near the tunnel where Borkus and the others are headed, he said. After retrieving the coffin in which the Demon King's blood had been sealed and the remains of the whips that had bound it, Vandali and his companions put Duke Hartner's castle behind them. Chapter 81, The Sunken House of the Duke and Visiting the Cultivation Village Again. That morning, there was a somewhat restless atmosphere around Duke Hartner's castle. The current Duke Hartner was completely bedridden, conscious for perhaps only a few hours a day. But the conflict was deepening between the two brothers competing to be the heir who was to act in the Duke's stead. The domestic affairs party advocating that the most important thing was protecting the Hartner Duchy from the Empire and that the Duchy's army was nothing more than a shield for that purpose. It was led by Lord Belton, the Duke's second son, born to his legal wife. The advocates of war arguing that the Amid Empire should be attacked and the Sauron Duchy recovered in order to bring even further prosperity to the Hartner Duchy. They were led by Lord Lucas, the Duke's eldest son, born to his concubine. Normally, Lord Belton would be overwhelmingly favoured in this dispute, but with the Hartner Duchy having become the front line in the war against the Amid Empire, Lord Lucas's influence had grown significantly with the army's support. Before, the people had thought it ideal if Belton acted as the head of house and made use of his shrewdness for managing domestic affairs while Lucas used his tactical genius to lead the army. But now, though their numbers were still small, there was a growing number of people saying that Lucas should act as the head of house and take bold actions with the army, with Belton staying in the duchy and supporting him. Normally, it wouldn't matter what the masses said, once the current head of family named his heir, the dispute over who would succeed him would end. But the current Duke Hartner said something different every time he opened his eyes. Despite appearing conscious, it was questionable as to whether he hadn't gone senile, so even his vassals were at the end of their wits. As a result, the duchy was divided into Belton's faction and Lucas's faction, as well as a third faction in the middle comprised of people who simply did their daily work without being concerned, as they didn't stand to gain or lose anything no matter who succeeded the Duke. Of course, this had created a strained atmosphere, but the situation had been ongoing for a long time, so the servants were all completely accustomed to it by now. Belton Summer, I have a little something I would like to discuss. Lord Belton, who had been heading towards the dining hall to eat an early breakfast, was called out by Baronicius, one of his trusted confidants. Baronicius was an honorary nobleman serving as a civil official. Though he was a subordinate of the finance minister of Lucas's faction who was trying to use the war to stimulate the economy, Baronicius himself was on Belton's side. Of course, this was only true because he was expecting a promotion and an increase in his court rank once Belton became duke. What is it, Baronicius? Asked Lord Belton. It seems that the Mages Guild has been behaving strangely as of late, Baronicius reported. The Guildmaster Kinup and several of the higher-ranking members are always inattentive no matter what people try, and it appears that several of their guards have gone missing. Oh dear, Lord Belton whispered quietly. The Mages Guild was one of his bases of support. Although each guild took an official stance of political neutrality, the support of the Mages Guild, which was developing all kinds of magic items and producing exceptional mages in large numbers, couldn't be ignored given the current situation. Belton's policy was that the maintenance of public order and the extermination of monsters should be left to the guards and knights, so he was particularly unpopular with the Adventurers Guild. Bribing the guildmaster of the guild headquarters was proving effective, but it was still true that there were many in the guild branches of each region who held animosity towards him. Belton did want to maintain his support from the other guilds and the churches in order to compensate for this. However, is this Anu's doing? Had Lord Lucas's subordinates bribed them? Or were they being blackmailed in some way, perhaps? This was what Lord Belton was asking with his brief question. That does not appear to be the case, Baronicius replied. We were not able to confirm any movements from Lucas Summer's subordinates. But we have been receiving some curious reports. I believe I can provide further information on these once they have been confirmed. I understand, said Lord Belton. Baronicius, I am sorry for making you work so hard, but I will be counting on you. Yes, sir. Baronicius left with a bow. He was a man who excelled at gathering information using spies. No matter what happened, he would be able to thoroughly investigate matters and provide good reports. Lord Belton watched as Baronicius walked away, holding high expectations of him. Suddenly, without warning, Lord Belton felt a small tremor at his feet. An earthquake. He wondered. It is small, but earthquakes are rare. No sooner had this thought crossed his mind, the tremor grew larger, accompanied by a thunderous noise. A large hole appeared in the floor right below Baronicius, and he screamed as he fell into it helplessly. Baroon! Lord Belton shouted. Belton Summer, it is too dangerous, please get back. Please get back. One of Lord Belton's servants, who had been accompanying him silently like a shadow, hastily stepped forward to pull him to safety. On this day, Duke Hartner's castle sank slightly, in a physical manner. The levels of the carpentry, engineering and golem transmutation skills have increased. Kinup, the man serving as the Mages Guild's guildmaster, was startled as he regained consciousness. What on earth have I been doing? He looked around him to see the higher-ranking members of the Mages Guild, wearing similarly astonished expressions. Among them were some of his accomplices who had connections to the subordinates of the pure-breed vampire Turnisha, though he wouldn't call them his comrades. Kinup don't know, where is this place? What were we doing? I cannot remember anything. Calm down, everyone, said Kinop. This is my mansion. Kinop had almost no memory of the past few days. However, he hadn't lost sight of what he was supposed to do. Remember, everyone. There is something that we must do, he said. Something that we must do. That's right, there is. We cannot stay here, we must hurry. Wait, we must not be hasty. If we are not careful, everything will be put to waste. Now then, everyone, gather all of the necessary evidence and entrust them to those you trust, Kinop instructed. You must not give them to the subordinates of Belton-sama or Lucas-sama, they could hush it all up. Indeed, even if they are in conflict with each other, they would cooperate to conceal anything that would put a stain on the Hartner family's name. Then should we take them to ambassadors of other duchies? There are no other options. Now then, get moving. After that, Kinop and the others gathered all evidence of their crime and underhanded dealings and hurried to the embassy, where ambassadors from other duchies were working. They were obeying the command that had been burned into their minds: confess your evil deeds and reveal them to the world. An investigation was carried out to discover the cause of the incident where Duke Hartner's castle sank and caused serious injury to Baronicus. Some time later, it became clear that it was the collapse of the underground space beneath the castle, commonly known as the underground cemetery. Why had this place, which had existed since over 100,000 years ago, long before the construction of the castle, suddenly collapsed? It was determined to be the work of the man whose corpse was found there, the one known as Kaida Kanata. This man had stolen from merchants and released an advanced fire attribute spell in the Adventurers Guild, causing many casualties. Considering his unusual actions, it was concluded that he must have been a subordinate of an evil god. Plotting to resurrect the Demon King, he had somehow broken the champion's seal. But he had died, probably due to a conflict with his allies or some accident that occurred when the seal was removed. Perhaps due to anxiety, the current Duke Hartner's condition worsened upon learning of this incident. He had been waking up at least once every few days, but now he had been reduced to incoherent muttering. At this rate, it was unlikely that he would live to see next year's spring. In addition to this, some of the high-ranking members of the Mages Guild that had been supporting Lord Belton, including the Guildmaster Kinop, had run to ambassadors dispatched from other duchies with evidence of the various crimes they had committed and evidence of their collaboration with the pure-breed vampires who worshipped the evil gods. This had caused great shock to the important figures in the Auburn Kingdom. Prominent supporters of Lord Belton, who previously had a 90% chance of being named the successor of the Hartner family, had revealed themselves to be traitors to humanity. And thanks to the evidence that Kinop and his subordinates had handed to the ambassadors, it had become clear that Baronicus, who had yet to regain consciousness, had connections to the vampires as well. Lord Belton himself had testified that he hadn't known all about this, and there was indeed no evidence proving that he had connections to the vampires. But now, not only the noblemen of the Hartner Duchy, but all of the influential noblemen of the Auburn Kingdom, had begun to doubt Lord Belton's leadership abilities. Also, someone had broken into the Duke's treasure storage room and stolen several treasures, but due to the aforementioned matters being of greater concern, it had been dealt with too late and the investigation wasn't carried out properly. Incidentally, some had testified to seeing an enormous, ominous bird flying through the night sky, but none had taken them seriously, assuming that these people had simply gotten drunk and seen things. Alder, the god of law and fate, was facing multiple difficult problems. The biggest of them was that Vandali, whom Alder had thought would spend at least several years hiding in the southern region of the Barngaya continent, had crossed the mountain range and appeared on the eastern side. Well, it seemed that he was doing some honest missionary work rather than plotting some large-scale conspiracy. However, Alder-sama, what could this person be thinking? I do not believe it likely that he truly wishes to become an adventurer. I do not know, is he trying to create a base for his activities in the Auburn Kingdom? The intelligence network for Alder and his subordinate gods were the believers who worshipped them. Thus, it was impossible for Alder and his subordinates to know what these believers did not know. Normally, they would do things such as dispatching familiar spirits to the world's surface more frequently, but many of the gods had lost their power during the battles against the Demon King and Vidra and had not recovered. Though they were not short by many, there were not enough gods to maintain the world. The gods' numbers had increased with those of the new generation, such as Mel, the goddess of slumber, but there were still not enough. Also, familiar spirits were spiritual beings. If they were dispatched to monitor Vandali, there was the danger that they would be discovered and their souls would be broken. This would be impossible for a normal human, but that damp would do so without hesitation. And though this wasn't necessarily the next largest problem, a strange incident had occurred. The incident itself had been nothing in comparison to the size of Vandali's deeds. A merchant and his daughter had been killed along with the adventurers escorting them, and their belongings had been stolen. It was pitiful, but also a tragic incident that occurred in great numbers in Lambda. Who is this man? The strange thing was the criminal responsible. According to the information brought to Alder by the other gods, his name was Kaido Kanata. He was a man in his 30s with black hair and eyes, which would normally not be seen in that region, and he had possessed a unique skill that had never been confirmed to exist in Lambda, as well as the ability to cast advanced fire attribute magic. And there were no records of him prior to this incident. This lack of records was the strangest thing about him. None of the gods knew of this man called Kanata, nor did they have any records of him. This was strange. In Lambda, the people knew of the gods' existence. Thus, every person, no matter how impious, had prayed to someone at least once. Perhaps there are some who have never even made a single prayer in their lives, but it is completely impossible for that to be true of every single person near such people. At the very least, if they have ever stayed in a city or village, they would have exchanged words with someone and been seen by them. Even if that has never occurred, as long as they are humans, they should definitely have parents who give birth to them. The man named Kanata didn't even have parents. He had suddenly appeared and, just as suddenly, committed acts of violence. It was a complete mystery as to where he had lived up until that age and where he had trained his skills to such a level. If one were to accept very far-fetched theories, it was possible that there was a community nearby where people worshipped only gods who didn't work for Alder, and Kanata was a member of that community. But there was no sign of such a community existing in the area in which Kanata had appeared. If he had used some lesser used road to stay hidden while journeying from afar, then the senseless violence that he had committed after that wouldn't make sense. Phaeton, it seems that you have an idea as to who this man named Kanata is, said Alder. Yes, Alder. Phaeton seemed rather hesitant to offer his report on Kanata. Actually, the man named Kaido Kanata was a man whom I had set my sights on and bestowed my divine protection, he said. What? Kuratos, the god of records, has no record of this, said Alder. Indeed. This man named Kanata is a man who was born from a pregnant woman who died in a monster attack while she was journeying on a stagecoach to meet her husband. After that, perhaps on a whim or to save him as emergency rations later, he was raised by monsters. I believe that is why there is no record of him. Indeed, if Kanata had been born under such circumstances, it wasn't strange to think that Kuratos had no records of him. I happened to notice Kanata's existence, took a liking to his talent and qualities, and bestowed him my divine protection, said Phaeton. But it seems that this is what corrupted him. So, you are saying that his unusually unique skill also originates from your divine protection? Aldo asked. Yes. There is no mistake. It seems that some among his victims were your believers, however. Yes, it seems that my divine protection and the fact that I was safeguarding him twisted this man's nature and led him to depravity. Why did you keep this man a secret even from Kuratos? That is, I believed that some would oppose to me granting him my divine protection and safeguarding him. I was imprudent. Alder couldn't erase his suspicion of Phaeton's answers, but without concrete evidence, he couldn't press Phaeton further. I do not know why his body was discovered in the sacred underground area where a seal of the Demon King was, nor do I know why he left me, but, enough, said Alder. I understand. We must inquire Nine Lord about the broken seal. Nine Lord, the champion chosen by Shizarian, the god who had been destroyed by the Demon King. She had become a goddess, replaced Shizarian and was now managing the gods of the wind attribute. She was even more short of hands than Alder, but as the seal in question had been created by her, it was necessary to request her cooperation. Now then, I will excuse. Phaeton bowed and attempted to take his leave, but Aldo asked him one final question. Wait. The man named Kaido Kanata has a strange name. He wouldn't be someone who came from another world, would he? Aldo was suspicious of the surname Kaido, a name that sounded foreign to him. But Phaeton didn't seem to understand why Aldo was asking him this question. No, it seems that he was randomly given that name by a monster. Perhaps he was named Kaido because they encountered him on a highway, and Kanata because he came from somewhere else. I see. I'm sorry for stopping you, said Alder. Not at all. Phaeton took his leave. I suppose I was overthinking things, Alder murmured, shaking his head. Now that I think about it, since Zeruan has not regained his power, summoning someone from another world to this one would be impossible. There are none among the Demon King's surviving subordinates who possess that much power, either. Only Rodcorti, the god of reincarnation, would be able to do such a thing. He repeatedly advocated the importance of development, but among all of the gods that Alda knew of, he was the one who had stockpiled the most power. With his authority, it wouldn't be difficult for him to reincarnate the inhabitants of other worlds into Lambda. But still, the actions of this man named Kanata are simply too foolish, Alda muttered. He had killed several dozen people, robbed, raped and, though this was still only a suspicion at this stage, removed one of the Demon King's seals. His actions didn't contain a trace of the development that Rodcorti advocated. It is probably my imagination after all. The more important matters at hand were dealing with Vandali, who was making mysterious move after mysterious move, and the locations of the sealed fragments of the Demon King. Phaeton, who had left Alda's side and returned to his own divine realm, celebrated the fact that he had fooled Alda successfully. Ha 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 ha. I did it. Now things will become interesting. It was good fortune that had allowed Phaeton to be the first to notice the man who had been reincarnated from another world. One of his weak believers had died, but this didn't matter. In fact, that believer was worthy of being praised for dying and giving Phaeton this information. There really was a monster attack on a pregnant woman around 30 years ago. Though I say so myself, I am quite brilliant for thinking of fooling Alda into thinking that a child had survived the attack, Phaeton gloated to himself. Now then, Rodcorti the Vandali whom you wish to kill so desperately is still alive and well. When will you send your next assassin? The moment Phaeton became aware of Kanata, he had scraped off some of his own flesh to create a spirit clone of himself to monitor Kanata. He also managed to succeed in learning various things about Vandali that Alda didn't know about. Phaeton also knew that none other than Vandali would have been capable of removing the Demon King's seal. That was why he was concealing this information. Phaeton had been a god for over 50,000 years. His days of extreme boredom were finally coming to an end. Now then, my beloved enemy who might be capable of killing me. Keep growing just as you are now. Now then, Rodcorti. Reincarnate someone to this world who, unlike that piece of waste matter you sent previously, is worthy of receiving my divine protection and sending my spirit clone to. Q-fufu, ki-ha-ha-ha-ha-ha-ha. Early in the morning, Kasim, Festa and Zena were training hard behind the jack-of-all-trades store. HMGH, ha. Festa, keep your voice down. Ah, sorry. They had been doing this training for a long time. However, it was only recently that they had become so enthusiastic about it when Vandali had stopped by in this village and given them a training session. Vandali had accomplished various unbelievable, miraculous things, but the thing that had surprised Kasim and his friends the most was the strength that he possessed despite his appearance. Though it was only in the unarmed fighting technique and throwing, Vandali's ability was far greater and more solid than those of Kasim's party. With the unarmed fighting technique in particular, he had properly learned the techniques rather than simply relying on his physical strength. He was like one of the instructors at the adventurer's school. But you know, I couldn't help getting so focused. Stuff like, keep your arms closer to your body, and, pay more attention to your feet. Yeah, I was told to keep my arms closer to my body as well. I was told to improve my stamina. Vandali's advice had been accurate. He had engaged in practice battles with each of them, identified their problems and encouraged them in an unforgettable way, telling them, I was advised about things like this before as well, so I think you can learn to do what I do, too. But come to think of it, I wonder what kind of person his mother was? There's no doubt that she was an amazing person. She taught him magic and unarmed fighting, so vampires are amazing after all. Kasim and his friends did have some misunderstandings, however. I wonder what Vandali is doing now? I suppose it's been around a week since he went to the city. Wouldn't he already be living in a dorm of the adventurer's school by now? But he's a special case, it wouldn't be strange for him to become a D-class adventurer without going to the school. He has a unique skill, but not only that, his magic and martial skills are ridiculous as well, right? Wouldn't the school's instructors have nothing to teach him? In fact, he could probably teach them a lot of things. But he wouldn't become D-class right away. There's an exam, right? In order for one to become promoted to D-class, it is necessary to take an examination to practically determine whether he or she can kill a person. This would probably be criticized as inhumane on Earth, but the adventurers of Lambda have to exterminate bandits and protect clients that they are escorting. If adventurers hesitate to kill in such situations and allowed their enemies to escape, causing further victims or allowing their clients to be killed, there would be no point in hiring them. That is why one cannot become a D-class adventurer without being able to kill people. I wonder if he can do it. We need to catch up to Vandali before we can worry about him. He is our senpai as an adventurer, after all. You're right. We need to show him a thing or two the next time we meet. Excuse me. Oi, what are you are? Vandali, why are you here? Vandali hadn't been called out to, or noticed, by the gatekeeper, so he had entered the 7th Cultivate village, found the 3 of them training behind the jack-of-all-trades store and approached them. Didn't you become an adventurer in the city? Did something happen in the city? Aji-san was worried because the traveling merchant that was supposed to come is late. It seemed that news of the monster rampage that had happened in the city of Niyaki hadn't reached the cultivation villages yet. No, the rules have changed so that dampers below the age of 10 can't register, so I've given up on it for now, said Vandali. The rules have changed? Forget that. You're less than 10 years old? It seemed that Kasim and his friends had indeed mistaken Vandali's age. Different races develop differently, so they couldn't really be blamed for that. There is also a rumor that within the year, dampers will be disallowed from entering the adventurer's school, so I'm thinking of looking for an opportunity to register as an adventurer in another duchy, said Vandali. Some A-class adventurer somewhere would apparently do something about it, but Vandali didn't want to get involved with him right now, so he certainly wouldn't rely on that happening. Thinking that he could become an adventurer thanks to that guy was something that he absolutely did not want to do. Look for an opportunity. You say it takes a month to reach another duchy. Well, you can fly, so it might only take you a few days. Yeah, you can fly, after all. Aware that Vandali had used flight to travel between the cultivation villages, Kasim and his friends didn't really try to dissuade him from this idea. Well then, if you don't mind, won't you join our party until then? Asked Kasim. Vandali blinked. I'm a civilian, though, he said. There's no rule saying that you can't add a civilian to your party, said Kasim. Normally, it wouldn't be something that would need a rule, said Zeno. But you're stronger than us, and he asked in a self-important kind of way by asking if you join us, but it's more like please make us your disciples. It's just as Zeno says, said Festa. We're weaker than you, but we can at least be a hindrance for you. Festa, that's the worst thing to say, even if it is a joke and it's true, so it isn't funny. It seemed that Vandali had become idolized by his senpais. For a moment, he thought that it would be good to form a party of adventurers and a civilian, but there was something that he needed to do. I don't mind, he said. But I am thinking of making a return to where I was raised. He couldn't tell them that he was planning to attack the nearby slave-run mine and rescue the slaves, so he decided to deceive them using the same story that he had told them before. I see. Then next time you have a chance, can you train us again? Vandali nodded. Of course. Kasim and his friends didn't look like they were particularly doubtful of his story, and Vandali could feel his heart, which had hardened due to the events in the city, softening. It seemed that these 3 were a source of comfort for him. So, are you going to leave soon? Kasim asked. In autumn, we're going to build a shrine and have a harvest festival, so make sure you come and visit around then. Each time Vandali had saved the people of the cultivation villages, he had asked for the construction of a shrine to Vido as his reward. It seemed that they would be complete in autumn. He hadn't requested for one to be built in the 7th cultivation village, however. In this village? Vandali asked. Yeah, Aji-san of the Jack-of-all-trades store and the village chief are building it. They said it's a good opportunity to do it, and it'll bring good luck, too. Ivan was really excited about it. He was a stonemason before we fled to the Hartner Duchy. He said he'd build a stone statue of you, too. It seemed that Vandali had become a figure of power or something without even realizing it. The fact that Vida's religion was becoming more active was something that Vandali and his companions should welcome, but was a statue of him being built such a good idea? Rudely hoping that the statue wouldn't resemble him much, Vandali asked another question. What are the other cultivation villages doing, then? A statue of him was being built in this village just because he had saved Ivan. How were things in the other cultivation villages? The other villages? Well, at churches, it isn't rare for stone statues of saints and heroes to be built as well as statues of the gods. That's right. And even though we say statues, they're not really that impressive. They'll be just a little bigger than you actually are, won't they? It seemed that Vandali would go down in the history of these villages. You have acquired the title, guardian of the cultivation villages. This was even reflected in Vandali's status. He was happy about this one, as it was a title that would be accepted in society without needing him to make an effort to explain it. "Ah, and I want to borrow your job-changing room today," said Vandali. "That's in the village chief's house." Job-changing rooms were facilities that were usually installed in guild buildings, but it wasn't only adventurers, mages, soldiers and knights who needed them. Even farmers and hunters working in farming villages needed the farmer and hunter jobs. As such, job-changing rooms were often installed in the village chief's house in small villages. Vandali visited the village chief's house, offered the wine that he had randomly taken from the wine cellar that had been in the mansion of the Mages Guild's guildmaster as a present, and entered the job-changing room. And then he touched the crystal ball that was far smaller than the one in Talersheim. Jobs that can be selected: insect user, arch-enema, zombie maker, tree caster, corpse demon, commander, disease demon, spirit warrior, whip tongue, calamity, vengeful berserker, dead spirit, mage, duck healer, labyrinth creator, ordnman, king user, medici. There's a whole bunch of new ones again. Perhaps Vandali would never have problems with job changing for the rest of his life. No, his lifespan was somewhere between 3,000 and 5,000 years, so perhaps it wasn't to that extent. Was whip tongue calamity read Benzetsuka? It had probably appeared because Vandali had been fighting with his tongue. What could vengeful berserker be? Vandali imagined that it would have something to do with his new skills like scream, mental encroachment and grotesque mind. Dead spirit mage was a job that would work with the dead spirit magic skill. It might let him draw more power out of Princess Livia and the other ghosts. Dark healer would probably provide bonuses to the surgery and venom secretion skills. Had it appeared because of the medical deeds he had performed in the cultivation villages? Labyrinth creator was the because he had created a dungeon, and Demon King user because he had consumed the Demon King's sealed blood. But what could Medici be? Vandali's curse was supposed to prevent jobs that had been previously discovered from appearing. It sounded like the kind of job that one would normally be able to acquire. Was it different from the mage job? It seemed suspicious. Wasn't it some kind of trap? First of all, Labyrinth Creator and Demon King user will make people think I'm dangerous if they see it, so I'll leave them for later. The same goes for Dead Spirit Mage, but Medici is suspicious, so that leaves a choice between Insect User, Tree Caster, Spirit Warrior and Dark Healer, I suppose. Vandali sighed. If I managed to register as an adventurer, I wouldn't have to worry about it so much. Since his status would be seen as he registered, he couldn't acquire jobs that would be problematic if seen yet. Or perhaps he should have registered at the Mages Guild after he had brainwashed the guild master? But it would have been problematic in the future if he had registered under the recommendation of someone. Or perhaps he should have registered at the Mages Guild after he had brainwashed the guild master? But it would have been problematic in the future if he had registered under the recommendation of someone who was about to lose his social standing. It was almost certain that he would be executed, or at least imprisoned for life. Alright, let's go with Insect User, Vandali decided. You have acquired the Insect Binding Technique skill. The levels of the Long Distance Control, Mana Control, Insect Binding Technique and Enhanced Physical Ability, Claws, Fangs, Tongue, skills have increased. Name, Vandali. Race, Damper. Dark Elf. Age, 7 years old. Title: Ghoul King, Eclipse King, Second Coming of the Demon King, Guardian of the Cultivation Villages, Taboo. Name: Job, Insect User. Level, 0. Job History, Death Attribute: Mage, Golem Transmuter, Undead Tamer, Soul Breaker, Venom Fist. User Attributes: Vitality, 344 Mana, 379,120,344 Strength, 188 Agility, 251 Stamina, 159 Intelligence, 784 Passive Skills: Superhuman Strength, Level 4 Rapid Healing, Level 6 Death Attribute: Magic, Level 7 Status Effect Resistance, Level 7 Magic Resistance, Level 4 Dark Vision. Death Attribute: Charm, Level 7 Chant Revocation, Level 4 Strengthen Followers, Level 8 Automatic Mana Recovery, Level 6 Strengthened Subordinates, Level 4 Venom Secretion, Claws, Fangs, Tongue, Level 4 Enhanced Agility, Level 2 Body Expansion, Tongue, Level 4 Strengthened Attack Power while unarmed, Small Enhanced Physical Ability, Claws, Tongue, Fangs, Level 2, Level Up. Active Skills: Bloodwork, Level 2 Surpass Limits, Level 6 Golem Transmutation, Level 7, Level Up. No Attribute: Magic, Level 5 Mana Control, Level 5, Level Up. Spirit Form, Level 7 Carpentry, level 5, level up. Engineering, level 4, level up. Cooking, level 4 alchemy, level 4 unarmed fighting technique, level 5 soul break, level 6 multicast, level 5 long distance control, level 7, level up. Surgery, level 3 parallel thought processing, level 5 materialization, level 4 coordination, level 3 high speed thought processing, level 3 commanding, level 2 farming, level 3 clothing, level 2 throwing, level 3 scream, level 3 dead spirit magic, level 2 insect binding technique, level 2 new unique skills, God Slayer, level 4 grotesque mind, level 4 mental encroachment, level 3 labyrinth construction, level 4 curses, experience gained in previous life not carried over, cannot learn existing jobs, unable to gain experience independently, insect binding technique, not manipulating, but binding. Well, I'll examine it later. I suppose I'll go and wait for Borkus and the others at the city where the Goblin King's village was. If it seems like they're going to take some time, I could fly to the slave-run mine to have a look at things first. 2. Job explanation. Venom Fist user. A job one can acquire if he meets the attribute value requirements and possesses the unarmed fighting technique skill at level 2, in addition to being knowledgeable in regards to various drugs, having learned their effects, being able to actually produce them and produce antidotes for them. Because it requires accurate scientific knowledge, nobody in Lambda currently possesses this job other than Vandally. It becomes possible to acquire the venom secretion skill, which allows the secretion of various drugs from the fangs, tongue and nails of every limb, as well as an enhanced physical ability skill that enhances the fangs, tongue and claws. It also provides a bonus to skills such as unarmed fighting technique, making it a job suited for fighting on the front lines. This job makes it easier to increase vitality, stamina and agility, while providing few increases to mana and intelligence. Title explanation. Guardian of the Cultivation Villages. A title that one can acquire by saving inhabitants of cultivation villages and solving their problems, causing over 90% of the villagers to acknowledge him. Cultivation projects involving someone who possesses this title have a much greater chance of success. Also, when danger approaches the cultivation villages, it becomes likely that the person with this title will happen to be present and deal with it. There are titles with similar effects, such as Goddess of Cultivated Land and Savior of Cultivated Land. Chapter 82, The Shadow Gnawing at the Slave-Run Mine and the Approaching
Hello guys, I'm back, and that will end our reading for today for the That Mage Doesn't Want a Fourth Time, and it was a very exciting chapters, I might say. It was interesting to really see or read about Vanity destroying one of her the ones that killed him back in the other world. So Kaino Kanata, he sucks so much. Yeah. Uh, I think the chapters explained it well. How of an idiot of his, yeah, he became such a degenerate of killing discriminately in his opinion of thinking that this world that he is right now to be just fantasy, not a normal world that he should be living on. I guess that's also the consequence that he was reincarnated multiple times already with his previous memories, so his attachment to a world that is foreign to him. Yeah, it makes sense that he would think like that if he has that kind of mindset. So, yeah, so he sucks so much, a big jerk, and he ended up dying in the most horrible and stupid way because uh, he tried to open up his big mouth and trying to antagonize Vandally even more, even though that he wasn't having any luck with any type of attack that he already um, dish out against Vandally. He should have realized that when everything that he did was useless. So, yeah. And the gods in that world are already having some few more problems due to the situation. But like what uh, uh, the main gods, I can't remember the guys. the guy's name again. Yeah, just the main god who's ruling over that world. He's already describing Vandally doing some the opposite stuff that they were expecting him to be doing, to being the evil one over this world. He's just going around uh, helping people and promoting uh, change in that world. While in the other hand, Kanata, who just got reincarnated by um, by the other god named uh, what's his name again? Why can't I remember names? Especially that god. Uh, Let me check it again. What's his name? Sorry about this, guys. Where is my guide? Um, uh, yeah. Well, anyway. Uh, so yeah. For now, Vandali is back to the village that he went the last time. Who he helped with? He helped the entire facility. Towns. Yes, right word. The towns that were around that area, the poor people, and it was interesting to see him interacting with uh, with innocent people like this because he went through a lot, just going to that city, the previous city, with people having ulterior motives against him and uh, yeah, with dark organizations, stuff like that, and to see him interacting with normal people who has gentle personalities, uh, it just shows that there's just other characters in the story that are not that really bad. Hmm. And ones who are in charge are actually the the gods that are trying to manipulate the world. They are the ones who are doing a very awful job in maintaining the world and creating progress. So here we are, Vandal is doing their job. And okay, so Vandal successfully killed Kanata. He won't but he won't be coming back because he destroyed his soul. And so there is no more issue for him. But let's see what Rod Court. Ah yeah, finally I can remember his name, Rod Courtney. So Rod Courtney, being a douche that he is, uh, I wonder how he hasn't destroyed his system already because of his stupidity. Or probably this is the reason. Due to his very first mistake of picking up Vandal's soul and reincarnating him back to the land of Landa. It was so stupid of him just to overlook that. Uh, and now he's suffering the consequence of doing so. And he's sending the other reincarnators just to assassinate him. But it's also backfiring at him due to his stupidity of picking up people without even thoroughly checking their background first, their personalities and stuff. And the guy that he was trying, Vandally, is the one who has the best character of them all, and he is the one being persecuted. So the irony of that. Uh, but now let's just see what our little Vandally can do, and he'll probably do some stuff in the villages that he is now with. Also, he gained some new powers again and new allies. It's really nice to see him resurrecting back the previous princess of the Titans. If you were wondering her looks, we have an illustration for that. Where is it? Here we go. Hiya! Yeah, so uh, I can't seem to zoom this out. Wait, sorry. Yeah. That's weird. Just a minute. Uh, oh yeah, here we go. So yeah, uh, so yeah, this is Princess Livia, I think. Yeah. Now she became a fire ghost spirit, and she is now leading an entire group of them, and she's now Vandal's new ally. And as we can see, that his that attribute magic can just do this wonderful stuff. If you're dead, you're coming back. If you're a ghost or a spirit, you come back. You can have another chance, another life. It's extremely an OP power, and so if it's a very yeah, it is a very broken power, and I think we can see more potential for this in the near future. I really like the art for this one, by the way. It's so wonderfully drawn with uh, the values and lighting. It's pretty well balanced. It's not 100% dark, with, but also not 100% light. It's just perfectly balanced. Especially the skin and the tone. It's perfect. I wish I can create something like this in the near future. hmm So Princess Livia here, we can. I can. I think I can see the more potential for her, especially her being a ghost, a fire ghost. Her burning just cities with her abilities, and now that she also has some minions with her, same fire spirits also. Mm. So yeah, moving on. Yeah, so this is Kanata getting destroyed by Vandalay just by that tongue attack. I love this illustration also. The the sheer audacity of Kanata just killing random people and being a very awful degenerate who just doesn't care about life. But Vandalay here, who tried his best to protect his people, other people, innocent people that he just meet, and then also uh, trying his best to improve himself. I, instead of not like Kanata here, who just thinks that the cheat abilities that he gained from the god Rod Courtney was enough to defeat Vandalay. He didn't investigate it. He do anything to understand the world or the abilities that he has gained. He just went through the stupid plan that he has, and then this is what he got. He got destroyed, including his soul. So he's goodbye forever. So look forward for more stuff from this light novel. I am very excited to reach the part that I left off last time when I first read this. That's still a bit of far off, but yeah. So anyway, we are finished with two sketches again for today. Uh, could have done this a bit faster, maybe if it doesn't have a lot more design. But this is mechanical creatures, tends to have a lot of details. So here we are. So let's go for the horse first. I love how they did this because the details is indeed a bit much, but it's perfect. I think it's really perfect. I love uh, the armor like structure building up to all his limbs, and the body is really slick. Not too detailed for the body, but good, simple enough to look like it's an intricate design. Also, the head is really amazing. Looks like a Kyren at the same time. We should have added a bit of an antenna like the ones I did here, but I think it's doing fine already. I wish I put up some weapons for this also. Maybe a spear or something. Yeah, would have been nice if I added a spear at the right side of its body. I like the one that yeah, that the one in the Zoids that I watched back then when I was a kid. Maybe that would have worked well with this kind of design. Yeah, yeah, but I love this. I really love the how they turn out. Uh, Looking forward for more design like this in the near future. Hmm, wonder where I can apply this. If I improve more with my speed in sketching, definitely I will create much more designs like this. But I would also like to simplify it a bit more. Maybe. Well, I think it's simple enough. Yeah, the big parts on the legs are with the tiny joints over here. I think the head is the one that suffered a lot of detail compared to the rest of the body. I guess the legs also of the hind legs. Hmm. But yeah, I think it's pretty nice already. I love it, and including the bat that I made here. uh, I was planning to make it what is it like walking on the ground, but I decided to just make it look like it's flying. So in this pose, gave it big ears. Look up some reference of real bats for this one, and just mix some Chinese like armor with mechanical parts, and this is what we got here. Mm, I love what I did with the head because it's like an Oni like kind of design. hmm And the body structure is good also. I think I did a good job for that one. I think it could really work well being animated. It flying around with this kind of wings. I think the fur design also work really well with this one also. This is, I think this part can be a weapon. Maybe I should have added a gun over here, a gun barrel, maybe. Make it look like it's a war type machine. Yeah, I'll probably add something like that in the near future. Next stream probably. But yeah, this is the bat, the horse, Nick, Lynx, the coyote. What will be next? Maybe a raptor. I'm thinking of a raptor. hmm A raptor, then something, something big, something ferocious. Rhino or probably an elephant. Could be another dinosaur, there's a stegosaurus or uh, yeah, something like that. Let's just think about that next stream that I'm gonna do. But anyway, guys, thank you very much for watching this recent new stream that I did. If you enjoyed this content that I did, please leave a like. And if you have enjoyed also the story, remember that you can check it out in Novels.pl. Link is on down in the description. There's a lot of wonderful novels there that you can catch, be interested in, because it's a very uh, busy world right now, and there's not a lot of time for you to go and read on your own. So why not just listen using a audiobook? And novels here are really well written, I might say. Just pick up the ones that are in the popular stuff. Uh, but yeah, there's also some new stuff that are good, I might say, because I've been reading a lot of stories this couple few weeks. Recently, I've been going through for some fan fiction, especially Naruto fan fiction. I will uh, do some uh, private projects for that in the near future. Actually, I'm doing it right now during my sideline, and hopefully I can make money out of it. That's what one of my plans. But here we are. For now, I am doing this sketchings, and hopefully this will turn out really well. I'll probably add some values and shadings for this one when I finish all of the design. Probably make one, two, three, yeah, a third one, maybe a long neck type of a creature over here. Ooh, a dragon maybe. But yeah, that's pretty much some of my plans for today. And for more information, you can check my Facebook account. Uh, Link is down in the description also. I post my live stuff also over there. I'll definitely upload some of my works and Pixiv also, and in that website and Facebook. And yeah, so anyway, thank you again for watching, and I'll see you again next time. See ya!